Hello there, everybody. It's me, Garrett Kidney, the co-host of You've Got to Be Kidding Me on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
And I am Liam Jones, my full name, and I'm also a part of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network as a co-host for You've Got to Be Kidding Me.
We are a TNA history podcast that covers TNA 1 month at a time. We cover all the drama, all the matches, all the Vince Russo nonsense you could ever want in your life.
Have you heard of TNA? I bet you have, but would it be funnier if two people made jokes over it the whole time? Probably.
So if that sounds like fun to you, check it out on this very Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network, and Liam will do bits and whatnot.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Super J-Cast. I'm Joel, joined by Damon McDonald. It is Monday the 12th of August 2024. This is episode 323 and we have yet another very special guest for you wonderful listeners this week. We have Mr. Grade 1 Climax himself, who came onto the show, 6 years ago, to talk about his experiences traveling across Japan and attending every single one of the shows of the G1 Climax. And the Madman is doing it again this year. Very happy to have on the show Fraserjapan. Welcome back.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Damon. Nice to talk to you again. 6 years. Been a while. Yeah, it's good to be back. Looking forward to chat about what I think's been a very exciting tournament.
I missed you. For those longtime listeners, they recognize the voice, they know the name, and the crazy circumstances in which we met, and yet here we are. Me being the most flighty-headed human being on earth and terrible at responding to text messages, yet still he hangs around and he's still in the mix, and I appreciate that greatly, and I know Joel does as well.
No, likewise. I think the good thing about professional wrestling gives a lot of enjoyment, but I think both here in Japan and across the world, without getting too soppy about things, you make lifelong friendships as well, which is another cool thing about the whole experience.
It is crazy. Do you want to give a too long didn't read version of how we met, or you want that for a later time? Like, I just feel like there's a ton of new listeners, and they might be curious as to how we wound up connecting.
Yeah, well, I guess there's a lot going on, so I'll keep it brief so we can get to all the important shit. But yeah, I think it was back in the Purocast days, so
yes,
it was not long after I had actually first come to Japan. I came to Japan about 2015, and I was always a wrestling fan before that, but that's when I really started getting into New Japan because I could go to all the shows live. So I stumbled across you and Colin and stuff, and I thought, it's pretty cool that there's an English-speaking podcast out there to follow the product as well. And then I think there was some Wrestle Kingdom show where you guys said on your Twitter that you'd be going along to, I think it was like Yano's Bar or something like that. And I thought, fuck it, I'm just going to rock up and introduce myself. So I think you guys were all there at a table, and I sort of gingerly walked across and said, I'm Fraser. I kind of like listened to your Purocast show. And you guys were very welcoming. I distinctly remember at the time that Yano held the tag team bouts with maybe Ishii or something like that. So it was a good fun night. You got to pose with that. And yeah. Long story short, we've been friends ever since. So it's been fantastic. And hopefully, and obviously in later, got to know Joe as well. And there's this sort of before and after COVID. So I'm definitely looking forward to the moment where after Corona is now finished, that hopefully both of you guys will be over together for a big show sometime soon. And the three of us can reunite. That would make me very happy.
I would love it.
I don't know if I've shared this story on the podcast before. When me and Fraser met the first time, I think it was Dominion 2018 with that Okada Omega match. And I had a couple too many strong zeros that day. So I was in a pretty bad state at the start of the show. And I had a spare ticket. I think I had like 3 extra tickets or something. And I ended up selling 2 of them to a couple and then 1 of them to another guy. And the couple wanted to sit together, so I had to sort of get in touch with the guy I'd sold the first ticket to and say, could you swap? And then in my drunken state, I accidentally messaged Fraser instead. So I was messaging Fraser saying, oh, can you swap seats with this other guy? Because this couple want to sit together. And then Fraser's messaging back saying, well, I'd love to, but I've got royal seats like right next to the ring, so I'm not really sure I can do that. I was just like, oh God, what have I done? So be careful with your strong zeros, children.
Yeah. I distinctly remember that. I was with a friend of mine, and I showed her that text, and I'm like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this, right? Like, is he serious that he wants me to go sit in third tier or whatever when I'm right next to the ring? So I think I diplomatically responded. So, I was kind of glad in a way to know that you were smashed out of your face.
Imagine if you'd done that. You'd finish like the greatest wrestling match of all time in history. You're up in the nosebleeds.
I would have never forgiven you for that, Joel, if that had turned out to actually have happened. So, I just as well did.
Rightfully so.
Fantastic.
I mean, it was one of the greatest nights ever, obviously. We're at Yano's bar. What was it? Eber or ET or whatever. And, it's with our Australian friends and everybody who came over. And we were just pounding them down. And here he comes. This handsome guy comes over in his sharp tailored suit. And I was like, wow, who's this? And he mentioned the show and he listens. I was like, oh, awesome, great. And he was just such a fun, like a guy who just like has a magical gift of being able to blend in anywhere. Boom, he's in. And like he would always, the one thing I will never forget is he would always say, I'll get him. And, you paid like one price and you drank for a couple hours, but he would always run and get him. Great guy. We're like, and I just remember saying, what a great dude. He's just constantly getting and as tradition in Japan, he handed me his business card, and I was like, "Oh, it's great to meet you. We'll stay in touch." Blah blah blah. And I look at his card, and it was a very important business card, and I was like, "Oh my god, this guy's very important." And I just found it to be.
Did you have a psychotic breakdown like in American Psycho?
I sure did. I did. I was like, "This guy's too important to be talking to us." And then, every time we came over, he would be there. And then I will say this. Do you remember the dinner we went to? It was the last night in Japan. And I was afraid to fly. And you were just like, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. But then when we were talking about a certain individual and I was going to lose a kidney going to North Carolina. So great.
At risk of totally overrunning this podcast about cutting edge New Japan with our old man stories of what happened in the past, there's one other one where we have to share, which I thought you were alluding to, which was Joel will remember this well because he wasn't there, where I decided to book a nice sukiyaki place, sort of an act of gratitude for you guys for bringing me hours of entertainment every week. And that was back in the old days, Joel, where you played a bit more nicer, and I think the post-wrestling guys were there as well. One big happy family. And unfortunately for Joel, I think that was right when your wife might have been expecting her first, and understandably she wanted to
get
the latest baby product. So.
I promised her to take her to Akachan Honpo to buy this particular buggy she wanted, or stroller. But to be fair, we've still got that one.
Nice.
And it is very, very convenient. It folds up nicely. It's very lightweight. So whilst I did miss out on that, and I still resent her and my child for putting me in that situation, it is a good buggy. So, silver linings.
So great. That is the greatest story ever.
Well, I won't bore the listeners with any more nostalgia, but that's a bit of context for how we know each other.
So good. So good.
All right. Well, obviously, Fraser, you can provide us with some unique insight into the G1 Tour itself, given that you have attended these shows. What can you tell us about just like the tour in general, or any specific venues that you think would give us some interesting insight into it?
Yeah, well, one thing I just want to mention, because not to brag, but more just to share that I feel like I genuinely do have a better feel of things. So I've only done the G1 tour twice. This is the second time. The first time was in 2018. Back then, my Japanese was pretty limited. I could speak a little bit of it, but sort of in between times, the important business card that Damon talked about, I sort of had enough of that, and maybe they had enough of me, I'm not sure. And sort of in between doing my own thing, gonna start my own business shortly. But I've invested quite a bit of time in learning Japanese, which means the fan interactions are far more meaningful because when you meet interesting characters, you can really talk to them. And I suppose if I
And now you can speak for the entire Japanese fan
Yes, he
base.
can.
Oh,
Yes,
absolutely,
yes.
right? Like some of our peers who take the, I think, very robust approach of getting one fan tweet, rolling it through Google Translation app.
No,
and then
not a tweet. Not a
translating
tweet. It was a Yahoo comment.
Oh, Yahoo comment.
Even worse. Yeah.
Even worse. And, I like how you put that through Google Translate. That has its limitations. And then you do the logical step of extrapolating that to the entire fan base. And then before you know it, you know what all of Japan thinks about wrestling, which is quite a magical and very efficient way of doing things. But coming back to this year's G1, there's probably two or three things that come to mind. And, I know that guys that listen to this show are pretty hardcore, so they've got their finger on the pulse. I think it's fair to say, and, I'm not a New Japan apologist or whatever, I enjoy the product. I think crowd levels overall are about pretty similar to last year. Not massively up, not massively down. What I definitely would say is that the people who are going to the shows this year, when I talk to them, are all using the Japanese expression "totemo omoshiroi," which basically means it's really interesting. And they say that because the shows are breezing by, a lot of them fast. You don't sort of sit there grinding through boring undercards. There's not these really long singles matches. And like, I remember even the Korakuen show, I think it was the first one, went just over 2 hours. So it's a very easy watch. But I think the thing that the fans enjoy the most is nobody knows who's going to win. Nobody knew at the beginning. And still, even when I talk to fans, even yesterday, I'm still in Nagaoka straight after, the A Block final. People still don't have any idea. Like, Oka's there. Seemingly, like, you guys were the only ones thinking that might be a possibility. So that was a huge surprise. B Block, people don't know what's going on there. There's a youth movement, and we might get onto it later, but I've met some fans that have been going for years and years and years, and they're saying this is one of the most interesting G1s they've ever been to. So I expect in terms of crowd numbers, there'll be a lagged effect. This is a year, I think, where things will sort of be retrospectively viewed as turning things around. So it's been really good. I think the other observation I'd make, just to be balanced, is match quality wise. If I compare it again to the 2018 show I went to, the reality is we just don't have the roster anymore, right? Tony Khan's come along with his bank account and taken a lot of our talent, and then those who have stayed, like Naito and Tanahashi and others, are obviously older than they once were. So we're not getting 5-star bangers, every second night or whatever it was, like it seemed to be in 2018. But I would say that pretty much you get a decent floor on pretty much all the matches, and they're all sort of, in the mid-range or better, and they're all good watches. So that's probably been the other difference. So when you really get a banger, and we'll probably come on to matches we really like later, they really do stand out. So to me, I think it's very much a positive news story. And I think the more objective data that people like to look at, like actual crowd size, later this year, next year's G1, that's when I think you'll start seeing that stuff come through.
I know that you mentioned that you've talking to the most hardcore of hardcores. They're going to every show, every G1. These are passionate hardcore fans. Have you experienced any people that maybe have parachuted back in? Maybe they were fans before, they kind of fell out of interest. It might not have been connecting with them in recent years, and then now they're coming back. Have you found any of that?
Yeah, so the first group of fans, Japanese fans that are really new, actually, was this bunches of doctors, dentists, and nurses. And I distinctly remember I was at an Osaka show, and there's this guy next to me, Japanese guy, and I got the sense, you get the vibe sometimes the person sitting next to you is probably wants to say something to you, but they're not quite sure if they can pluck up the courage. And he did, and it turns out this guy is Naito's dentist, so he knows Naito very well. And he's like, some guy took a big bump or something. He said, a big bump or whatever. And I got to know him, and he introduced me to the community of doctors and nurses. And, going back to Corona times and the sort of social expectations in Japan, the last thing that a doctor, a dentist, or a nurse could do in that period and the period afterwards. As everybody knows, Japan had pretty strict rules and they're in place for longer. Japan always operates on the basis that nothing is really a law. It's all about social expectations and manners. So it took a long time for those guys to come back. And they were the hardest core fans, right? Like going back to probably kind of the dates that you started watching, Damon. And so they know absolutely everything. And it's been pleasing. Like this year, those guys have started to come back. And at the end of the Ryogoku show on Sunday night, we're all going out to dinner again. So that, to me, kind of in a very simple anecdote form, is an example of that. There are, of course, still many of the fans that, COVID broke the habit, right? And like going to wrestling is like a habit. And when you suddenly stop and you realize, you can save all this money by not going to shows, and then on top of it, during the worst of COVID, the New Japan product was pretty shitty. So some of those fans have still not come back. But I definitely think this G1, and I know we've still got 4 shows to go. But I think this G1 will be the one where you start really seeing the turning point of people coming back into the product more.
So you've touched on the Japanese fandom there. Like, what would you say the main difference is from your observations between Japanese fans and Western fans? Are there any little sort of cultural quirks that stand out to you?
A couple of things come to mind, and I have to predicate this with, to be honest, I haven't gone to that many wrestling shows in the West. And I've never been to a wrestling show in the US, never been to a wrestling show in the UK. I did go to a wrestling show in Australia when WWE went there. I have to shamefully admit that. But I would summarize the Japanese fan mentality as follows. So the Japanese fan base, like when a Japanese fan goes to a wrestling event, they want to have a good time, right? As does everybody. But they genuinely do care that the person sitting to their left, the person sitting to their right, the person in front of them, the person behind them, all have a good time as well. That they're not bothering anybody by being too noisy or like standing up. No one ever stands up at shows in Japan. Nobody is allowed to eat in the venues in Japan, which is a good manner, but sometimes on a longer show that's quite tough going. And equally, if tall people go to the show, they often turn around to the people behind them and say, "Can you see okay?" People are pretty good about taking their caps off if they're in front of somebody. So it's a really pleasant experience. And for me, like being a foreigner, I think it's quite novel most of the time. I mean, I'm not the only foreigner that goes to shows, but there's not that many of us. So normally, the fans are quite chatty, ask if I've never met them before, where are you from, what do you do? So I think it's a collective fandom mentality, and they are quite vocal and they are quite quick to call stuff out. And I did listen to the intro to one where you talked to the Kiss guys and Samsa last week. That new edict, that one about you can't hang up your towels in the front row, that was in direct response to a fan complaining about it on Twitter. So New Japan themselves have got their finger on the pulse and really looking into that. And people are abiding by that, right? So ever since that edict came out, the Japanese are very good about following the rules. So all the towels and the pionsuke, which is the little, the shoulder teddy ones, they're all gone. So now the discussion is, as you alluded to, has moved on to other factors. One which I do have some sympathy for is this one about fans going into the building with caps on, and then sort of annoyingly the caps sort of flipped up. And I can imagine New Japan being quite reluctant to ban that because, it's good for merch sales and everything. But it is quite irritating when you're sitting behind somebody who's got a hat on, you're indoors. But the good thing is, Japanese people are polite. This happened at Fukuoka. There was a lady next to me. There's a tall guy sitting in front of her. So she tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Do you mind if you take your cap off?" And he said, "Sumimasen, gomennasai." He took it off straight away. And then, of course, there's a more controversial one that's out there. And I know it's a bit...
Go ahead. Stick it to me.
So, Damon, I would encourage you...
to do what? What am I going to do? Get a toupee? What am I going to do?
No. Hear me out.
Right.
As your friend, I recommend that you get across here as soon as you can. Because I feel like the drawbridge is being taken up soon, and if you're not fast enough, you got to miss out. And I think the bald people thing, there's basically two solutions to it. So from me, like as a fan, like bald people by themselves are obviously, they're human beings as well. There's nothing wrong
Disgusting.
with that.
Just say it. Go ahead.
But it's quite frustrating. Like I sit close to the ring most of the time, right? And there are far better photographers going to New Japan than me, like Tiger and all these guys with the long lens taking the awesome shots. And I'm really reliant on exactly the right moment, right? Like the rest is close enough to me. The lighting is good and everything like that. And there's nothing worse, to be frank, than taking, there's this magic moment. It's awesome. Then you go to look at it, and then there's this bald head in front of you. And you think, I can crop that out, no problem. But no, there's a huge overexposure from the shiny bald head
Son
getting
of
in
a.
the way of the entire photo. And coming back to Japanese fan mentality, this is all about respecting your fellow fan, right? And I don't think bald people are doing that. So I think there's two ways this will ultimately play out. One, you can buy a wig and, become a normal person again. That's one thing.
Jesus.
Or if it's in Japan, it'd be the same for you, Damon. I mean, you effectively do this already, right? Like, they can just watch your home on world, right? No big deal.
Oh,
They just
jeez. I'm getting banned. See, all right, so what you're telling me is this. I had to get a seat at the very top against the wall so no one sees my bald head. And add to that, my girth as well. They had to see around me. So the seat that is perfect for the big, fat, bald American is at the very top in the corner. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Yes or no?
Well, I must admit I hadn't thought of that, but I think that's a good initiative, right? They could have a bald section. So any bald fan who is genuinely, if they're in the middle of the crowd, are ruining the fan experience for everybody else. If they sit in the very back row, I think that's fine. So obviously I'm on tour, right? So I've met one or two of the wrestlers, like, in the hotel lobby or whatever, and because I'm at every show and I'm a foreigner, one or two of them sort of know me, we exchange pleasantries. But whenever there's a chance, I tell them, like, because I thought this board thing was quite amusing. I saw that was a fan response to the official Twitter announcement around the banning of towels. So I've been kind of in people's ear and say, can you talk to Tanahashi about the bald people and see if something can happen? And one funny Japanese cultural nuance, just to finish the conversation off, is I told my girlfriend about it. My girlfriend knows about New Japan mainly because I've told her about it, but she does go to the occasional show, and she's coming to Chiba for the quarterfinals. And she told me something which I didn't know, is that it's a bit of a Japanese national pastime to make lighthearted fun of old people like yourself, Damon. So this was kind of more in fun than anything too serious, but it is possible next year, Damon, you might not be able to get into Wrestle Kingdom. Or if they set up this special section for you right at the back, then it might be possible. But bring your binoculars so you'll be able to see okay.
God damn it. You know what? Know what they need to do? They need to have even further quarantine me out. Bald, fat, but enormous penis. Enormous. Like that, I would have to have a row just for those gentlemen. One person, me, in there. That would be it. Thank you. Listen, just because you're follically blessed, don't get on your high horse there, pal. Jeez, unbelievable. All right, Joel. Now that the discrimination against bald people has taken place, where can we go here next?
And the dick references, yeah.
That's true.
Well, Fraser, could you give us some insight on the actual logistics of the tour, like the geographical spread of the shows, what the travel's like, the infamous summer heat, what the acoustics are like, just bits and pieces like that?
Yeah, so this G1 is very different to normal, and sort of the Japanese geography, at least the way I think about it, is more from north to south, right? So north is Hokkaido. I think all the people listening to the show are familiar with that, the supporter shows. And sort of in the south is Kyushu. And Tokyo, this is very loosely speaking, is kind of right in the middle. And before this podcast, given how studious you guys are and how serious you are about your work, I thought I better match the level of preparation that you do. So I actually went back through the tour schedule to see where it had been. And there's one quite fundamental difference between this show, this tour rather, than all the other ones. So normally Hokkaido is one place they will always go, right? And it's even, I think, maybe last year, the first two shows were in Hokkaido. The reason they're not going there this year is the venue, it's Hokkaido Kitsuyao, is undergoing renovation. So there's no G1 in Hokkaido. That's why also, if you look further into the calendar, I think it's September, they're doing a Hokkaido-wide tour to kind of make up for that. So
Is that why Taichi wasn't included?
Well, yeah. Let's just allow ourselves to digress for a moment. One thing I would say when we talk about sort of who's in, who's out, I think the whole 20-man field thing has definitely restored the prestige to the tournament. The kind of the elite 20. We had the 18 automatic qualifying guys, and then we had the last two. And I think the popular perception was that Taichi. And when I say popular perception, I'd say that at two levels. One with the fans and two backstage, that Taichi he's in his 40s, but he can definitely still go. He's very well respected. And there was quite a lot of surprise, and there still is, that he's not in it. I tend to be a positive fan, so I don't want to sort of talk about who shouldn't be there and maybe would be in his spot. But Taichi and Yoshihashi, to a lesser degree, were the two guys that people felt quite sorry for. I think most Japanese fans understand that while Ishii's a great wrestler, he is getting on a bit now, and doing 9 singles matches in a row is a bit tough. But yeah, Taichi being from Hokkaido, maybe that played into it. I don't know. But the thing I was going to say is that there's 19 shows on this G1 tour. And again, because Damon was quite demanding and saying I have to do the same level of research as you guys do, I took a look at the tour. And the interesting fact is, I always think of Tokyo in the middle. So the first time we had a show that was in Tokyo was the 11th night out of 19. The first 10 were all south of Tokyo, not north. And Tokyo is loosely in the middle, you could say, of Japan. So they were going to places like, they started in Osaka, they went further down to Hiroshima, then they went across to Takamatsu and Shikoku. Then they went down to Kyushu. Then they came back up to Osaka and Nagoya. And then we finally got the Tokyo shows at Korakuen, right? Then we did Yokohama. And there's only basically 2 shows out of 19 that are north of Tokyo. One was Sendai, which just happened. And the other one is Nagaoka, where I am right now. So it's a very, very southern skewed tournament, you could say. And for some fans, obviously not everybody's got as much money as other people. It's a real bummer, right? There's a lot of fans, say, in Hokkaido that can't go. The northern part of the main island of Honshu, where Tokyo is called Tohoku. And a lot of people from that area can't go. All the people in the south are happy, right? Because they're getting a shitload more wrestling than normal. But that's a very unique part of the tour. That would be my first point. The second point is, I would say, is that because I have a very kind, lovely, understanding girlfriend who lets me go to all these shows, what I've taken upon myself is whenever there's a spare chance to get back to Tokyo in between the very rare gaps in the schedule, I think there's 19 shows in 29 days, so you can do the maths on that, and there's not a lot of spare time. I endeavor to get back to Tokyo as well, and that's with good intentions, but that really caught up with me recently. Like maybe in 2018, I think in the middle of the tour, there was a point where I wasn't so much tired from the logistics of everything. I was just a bit tired that some of the shows were a bit slower. That's not been an issue this year. I'm tired just because I'm going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote from the last place we went to before Nagaoka, which is Sendai. So Sendai is it's a Shinkansen trip, which is about 1.5 to 2 hours north of Tokyo. And I had planned it on Friday morning, and my scheduled departure time was 9:30 from Tokyo Station. So I was at home in Tokyo for that one. I woke up at 7 o'clock, went for a run, and came back home and got ready. And I thought, oh shit, now I've got 15 minutes up my sleeve here. Might be a chance to get a quick nap in before I go for my Shinkansen ride.
15 minutes? Oh, you're cursed yourself. You're never. All right, I'm sorry, not to cut you off. Got.
Yeah, but Damon, like 15 minutes on a G1 tour is like gold, right? Like that's the equivalent of 8 hours in a normal time. So I set the phone alarm and everything for it. So I wasn't stupid. I didn't just nod off without any safety net there. And I don't know. It was about 8:30 by that stage. So it was about an hour before, right? So the idea was get up and get a cab or get a train, or whatever, and then. Went to bed and then woke up, and to my horror, I looked at the time on my phone and I was just so exhausted from all the travel. And it was fucking 1:30 in the afternoon. I was like, not only have I missed the departure time, my train is already in Sendai by now.
Oh my
God.
God.
I was like, thankfully, that was the day before the show, so I didn't miss anything. So I managed to get on another one. And it's like, I was telling my girlfriend, like, fuck, I'm really tired now. I don't know how the fuck the wrestlers are doing this. They've actually got to wrestle. All I got to do is sit on a chair for 3 hours at each show.
Still.
And then, on the way back from Sendai, same trip, I stayed there 2 nights, right? Just had one suitcase with me. And so I woke up on time, and I was very careful, set the alarm, and I woke up, went for a run, didn't do any of this 15-minute nap shit. That's too risky. Got on the Shinkansen, took the ride home. Then you guys have been to Tokyo, so you kind of know how it works. So Sendai to Tokyo is on the bullet train. Then once you get to Tokyo Station, I get on the Yamanote line, which is like the circle line of Tokyo.
Yep.
Get to the closest stop, and because it's brutally hot, and maybe we can get to that at some stage, I got a cab ride home. And then I was unpacking, right? Because the very next day I was going to Nagaoka. And I'd taken one suitcase with me to Sendai, and I started unpacking, and I got the so-called omiyage, which is like the food souvenirs that you buy for friends and stuff, or whatever is the local product. In Sendai, it's gyutang or beef tongue. It's the important thing, so I opened up that, and then I was like, okay, I better unpack the suitcase. It's like, oh, where the fuck is my suitcase?
No.
I brought one suitcase with me, and I forgot it. And it's like, my God, I am so tired. But as you guys will know,
sure, you failed
Japanese culture, if there's one country you lose something in, let it be Japan, right? Because chances are it's still going to be there. And I quickly did the maths in my head, and I realized, yeah, fuck, I didn't even take it on the Yamanote-sen, which is good because that's a circle line going round and round forever, so who knows where it is. And I knew it was on the Shinkansen. I didn't make it to a taxi. And the good thing was the Shinkansen stopped at Tokyo. So I thought everything's kind of in my favor here. It's at Tokyo. It's at Shinkansen. Everything's organized. So I got a cab straight away, went straight back to Tokyo Station, and get to the gates and talk to the staff. And you need to, outline this on this train at this time. And then they'll say, please give a description of the suitcase. I say, it's a purple one, it's pretty small. And then they say, for security reasons, you got to tell us at least 2 things that are in the suitcase.
Oh, no.
And one thing which was giving me a fucking heart attack was that there was a MacBook in there. I said, there's a MacBook in there. I was thinking, what the fuck's unique that I've got a second thing in there, like, some T-shirts and toilet bag or whatever. And I said, I know why. And I said, I got a Shin Nihon Puroresu Zabuton, like New Japan cushion is in there. It's like, what other loser is going to have that? Right? And so thankfully, like 10 minutes later, I was in this office and my suitcase had been locked, and then I just need to sign the form, got it back, straight back home. Even the cab driver who I had told my story to was waiting for me in the car park so I could take the same cab back to my house. It's like such a cool place to live, Japan, right? Like, it's not just manners, it's like respect for everybody else. So if you do fuck up, it doesn't really matter. But I was like, how the fuck do I go somewhere with only one suitcase? And I'm so tired that I realized that I get home and the only suitcase I had, I didn't even bring with me. It's like,
wow,
something's really wrong. So the last thing I'd say is thank you for the opportunity to join the show, Joe and Damon, and thank you so kindly for doing it at 5 a.m. Japan time.
Give you a lot of sleep, right?
Fucking better.
Yeah, no doubt. Can I got to ask you a question.
Yeah.
The logistics of planning a G1 tour. So I'm assuming, and
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
you're buying your tickets first, right? So you see the schedule released. Then then the first priority is getting tickets to every event. What buildings are the hardest to get? What buildings are the easiest to get?
Okay, well, I'd explain it as follows. So, to be frank, it's a big risk. Let's say, big risk is over dramatic, but it's a big risk in a pro wrestling fan context to do it because the timing. I'm a member of the fan club, right? The Japanese fan club get priority access to all New Japan shows, and if you want to be sitting in the first few rows, you've got to go on the ballot. And the annoying thing about New Japan is the fan club ballots come out about 3 or 4 months before the actual event. So, for example, like the January 4 and 5, they've already been gone and done like about a month ago, right? G1 hasn't finished. You got no fucking idea who's in the main event. So it's a total guesswork of are the shows going to be good that you're going for? And let's be frank, up until this year, the last 3 or 4 years of G1 have not exactly been vintage, right? So if you're going to lay down a lot of money, because generally I like to sit ringside, so my first decision is, does my gut feel that it's going to be a good year or not? And this year's been a weird one, right? We've had some really good shows like New Beginning in Osaka, then we had some really shit shows like New Beginning in Sapporo, where Joel's heroes like Matt Riddle and all those guys and Dolph Ziggler, all his favorites got titles straight away. But I was a bit unsure, but I've got this faith in the mysterious shadowy figure that is Kikuchi. Once he was back, I thought I'm gonna go to all of them, but I made that decision quite late. So when the fan club ballot came out, I only actually bought tickets to about, I think it was something like 11 of 19 in the shows. There's about 8 which are a bit more tricky to get to.
11 of the 19. He's like, oh, I got to tone it down a little bit. I'll only go to 11 of the 19. Okay.
I know. Just taking it easy this year, Damon.
Yeah.
And then, but do you know what? Like, the thing that swung it for me, which you've kind of alluded to indirectly on your shows, is there's 2 individuals in the locker room that aren't the best of friends, that were in the same block, drawn together, and there's a certain date that they met, and that was one of the shows I didn't have a ticket for. And it started to become clear to me that this G1 was going to be a good one. So I decided to buy a ticket to that show, which took me to 12, and then I thought, fuck it, I'm going to go to all of them. So I bought the other 7 or whatever and decided to go to all. I mean, purely getting in the doors is a pretty straightforward affair, apart from maybe Ryogoku itself, where the tickets are fully sold out and it's difficult to get in. And there have been other shows along the way that have been sold out, like Korakuen is always sold out because it's only 1,500 people. It's in the middle of Tokyo. All the hardcore fans go. They always want to go to the G1. But I'd say 75-80% of the time you can get tickets pretty easily. And the thing I can rely on a little bit is I've got quite a lot of people that follow me on Twitter. If I get really desperate, I'll do the call for tickets, and hopefully someone will be kind enough to give me one if I'm missing out. But I would say the biggest risk of it all is you're laying down a pretty serious amount of money 3 or 4 months out without really having a strong feeling if the G1's going to be good or not. Because the worst thing is to obviously lay that all down, and then you don't have a very fun time if it's a boring tournament where the winner is obvious or the wrestling is shit or whatever.
And then you plan hotels, trains, transportation around that as it gets closer to the date? Or are you a guy that's like, okay, let's get this all booked, let's get this all fucking sorted out so that I can have at least peace of mind of I know where I'm going and when I'm going?
Yeah, so I'm not like an anxious traveler. I mean, travel is a real passion of mine, and if there's time later in the call, I'll tell you sort of what I'm doing business-wise now, sort of doing my own business sort of related to this. But I'm a big believer that when you go somewhere, you've done the research beforehand, so you're not having to worry about making bookings when you're in the place that you are, and you can just focus on having a good time. Go to the show, know what the good restaurants are to try, if there's some nice local shrine or other attraction to go to, then you're good. But because I made my decision quite late in the day that I'd go to all of them, I distinctly remember that you guys remember that the opening night was in Osaka, right? Like the opening 2 nights were in Osaka when we had 10 singles matches each day. And then the 2.5 or so hour Shinkansen ride there and back, I just went hard on my phone on Google Maps to basically book all my accommodation and all my Shinkansen. I rented a car for part of it down south when the shows were really spread out, and sort of got it all done. And I've been chasing my tail a little bit, like as we've gone, there's been 1 or 2 venues I still haven't booked. But I've kind of done it on the fly, sort of an just-in-time method. But always, by the time I get there, hotels sorted out, restaurants are sorted out, the logistics of getting around to these places is sorted out, which makes it much more fun because then you can just chill out and not worry too much. Unless, of course, you sleep 3.5 hours plus your scheduled Shinkansen time, and then you've obviously got to reset your plans again.
Fantastic. What about the venues themselves? Any particular favourites for you?
Yeah.
Any that didn't really come across on TV very well?
So I just say there's definitely recency bias here, but I think one of the best venues is the one at the show just last night, Aore in Nagaoka. It's a very strange town, this one. It's in Niigata Prefecture, but it's a very small town. So there's almost nothing else apart from this wonderful venue, which has got a really cool architecture outside. And then inside, the set and the acoustics are amazing. And it was a public holiday yesterday in Japan. It was a Monday, so it's a long weekend. So it's a super hot crowd. So that's always good. So this venue is the one they often have the New Japan Cup final in each year. And I think this year it was. The Suji Goto match was here. That's a really good one. Other favorites, I have Edion Arena is always good. The Osaka fans are pretty hardcore. That's good. I like venues, like I like to take photos at shows. So I do enjoy the venues that are all black inside. And the one in Yamaguchi, KDDI Hall, is really good. It's totally black, so if you get a good photo, it looks cool because it's a perfect background. Yokohama Budokan is the same. Korakuen is special, and I think it's really special for the wrestlers. Like, again, I know 1 or 2 of the wrestlers on an informal basis, and one of the first things they'll do when the draw comes out is they'll see where am I on the Korakuen card, and they're all hoping, obviously, they're in the main event, but more importantly, it's who I'm up against and can I have a banger. And we'll get onto it later, but in my opinion, the best match of the tournament happened at Korakuen, and the wrestlers love it, right? No matter how many times they've been there, that's an incredibly special place for them to go. On the flip side, the one type of venue I don't like, which I'm sure you guys hear, it's a common name, and unfortunately in Chiba we're going to another one of these again, is the so-called Messe venues, Messe. And given Damon strict instructions, I did some research to find out what Messe was. I actually thought it was a brand, because generally these Messe places are like, let's just call them huge conference halls. They've got incredibly high ceilings. They're designed for like expos and stuff. So even if you have a wrestling show with good audience, there's still this cavernous area which is unoccupied. And even if you've got what is a hot crowd, the noise just evaporates, a little bit like the Tokyo Dome does. And I hate those venues to be quite frank. And there's a lot of them in Japan, and maybe they're cheap to hire. I don't know why they go there a lot. But Messe is written in katakana in Japanese, and katakana is always used for words that are of foreign origin. And Messe is actually German, I understand, for trade fair. So it's like a trade fair hall. So we had one of those was Nagasaki, one of those was Takamatsu, and Chiba, annoyingly, because Chiba last year, they went to quite a good one called Funabashi, which is a very good venue, but we're going to one of these Messe shows again. And I guess one thing I just say, sort of listening on World versus live. Obviously, if you're watching World, you can only hear whatever comes across your audio feed, right? So fair enough. But sometimes, like Takamatsu is a good example. I heard a lot of people say the crowd was dead. The crowd was actually very good. We had all these drunk salary men that had come straight from work, and they were quite boisterous, and they were making a really good noise, really good fun and stuff. But I think just on World, it totally doesn't get picked up by the mic, so it just disappears into this giant cavern of a hall. So that's probably my take on the local venues. The last thing I'd say, which is quite interesting, is even though I've been going to a ton of wrestling shows for the last 9 years, when I go to Hamamatsu Arena, which is the next show, this will be the 7th venue that's new for me to go. That's partly because we're going to all these southern venues, a lot of them for the first time, and they've just done one or two unique ones. Like, for example, in Osaka, they had a third show after the Edion Arena where they went to Yamato Dagaoku, which is the Yamato University. So there's been quite a few interesting venues to go to. So that's what I would say. So sometimes on World, I would just encourage, especially if it's one of these messe places, don't assume that the crowd are dead and don't care about the match. It may just be that the acoustics of the venue are very shit. That's something that I'd say.
Do you find different venues and different cities have different types of fans? In other words, I think a lot of people kind of get hung up on Osaka being, for Western audiences, the Chicago of Japan, and they're a little bit more blue collary and they're ready to rock and roll, whereas other places might be a little subdued and a little. Do you find that? And I'll tag on to that. Do you find like those hardcore fans? Do they give a shit about what we consider match quality? And I put in air quotes, or are they just there to have a fucking good time?
No, I think your synopsis is spot on. So I think the analogy between Osaka, Edion Arena, and Chicago is bang on. Again, I say this as somebody who's never been to Chicago, so I'm sort of in the other camp where any Chicago shows are only ones I watch on television. But back in the day, CM Punk, John Cena, Money in the Bank, that type of, super hot atmosphere. You get that at Osaka. Osaka is a very, culturally speaking, Osaka is part of the so-called Kansai area, or Western Japan, whereas Tokyo is deemed to be Eastern Japan. And there's quite a few interesting cultural nuances between the two of them. But Osaka people in general are known as a bit more friendly, a bit more expressive, whereas Tokyo is a bit more reserved, a bit more quiet. So Osaka fans really go hard, and they do care about match quality. And give you a practical example of this is the infamous dog pound cage match, or whatever the fuck, what's the proper name of it? That was at Osaka, right, back in February. And we all remember that show, for better or for worse. But the Osaka crowd were really into it, right? I mean, that kind of felt like you were watching a movie. It's like, fuck, have we gone a little bit too far here or something? And Osaka fans are also famous for stamping their feet really loudly when it's a really good match and it's a false finish or something like that, and everyone's really excited. So they, I would say, are the most hardcore, passionate fans to go to. Tokyo, I think Korakuen is special because that's where the hardcore fans go, right? Like, there's only 1,500 people can go. Tokyo's a city of like 30 million people. You do the maths on that. And if you've got enough pro wrestling fans and your product is half decent, you should sell it out. And there's a recent example of this, which was that Despair Invitational show, that kind of one-off show. That was promoted by Despair himself, but it was all done through the New Japan ticket sales system. And that was for maybe the only time I can ever remember where all of the tickets were bought by fan club members only. There was no public sale of the tickets. They were all gone, and there's a bit of controversy about secondhand ticket sale resale sites and stuff like that. But Korakuen is very good for three main reasons. One, and you guys have been there, right? You know the place very well. It's the Japanese say semi, very narrow. That's one. Two, the ceiling is very low, so all the noise is very much contained, and you're very close to the wrestling ring, no matter where you sit in the venue. And then, of course, because it's in the middle of Tokyo, it's a small venue. The most hardcore fans are the one that get their hands on the tickets. So I think that's good. When you go to the countryside, those guys probably only get maybe at most 2 or 3 shows a year. So it's quite an event for them. But that countryside people, they're a bit more reserved. Sometimes they don't really know how to react because they don't go to enough shows enough. So it's not that they're not passionate. They do care differently. But they're just not as used to, I don't know, the kind of the fan culture. So the big places in Japan, I'd say, for wrestling would be Tokyo, Osaka. I think here in Nagaoka is an important place. Again, New Japan Cup Finals typically here. That's always a good place to go. I think Sendai Zebio Arena is a very, very good venue as well. So that's another quite special one. And then Fukuoka is probably the other bigger one. Although this year's G1 was not that great. They did 2 nights in a row. And I know 1 or 2 people have made some mention of the numbers there. But that's probably the other place. And then the rest you can loosely say is the countryside in inverted commas.
Okay. Nice.
All right, well, let's get into the blocks themselves then, and we'll discuss the wrestlers, what they've been up to since we last recorded. And Fraser, you can give us some insight onto, well, your personal thoughts on the wrestlers or how they've been received by the fans and the venues that you've attended.
Yeah.
So let's start with A block, which is all finished now. We're done with the A block. And top of the pile, we've got Zack Sabre Jr. on 14 points, who has beaten Evil, Gabe Kidd, and Sanada. And I feel Zack's really stepped up and led by example here, because not only is he giving multiple wrestlers their best matches at the tournament, but I think he's having the kind of dominant results that I think he deserved. He's the king of the flash win against Evil. He's had a few of those. Those always gets a good pop. The Gabe match, that was the annual August 8th Fujinami Inoki Love Letter tribute match, which I absolutely loved. Lots of callback tributes to that. And Zack let Gabe chop the absolute bejesus out of his chest. That was one of my favourite matches of the tournament, and I think really earned those Bret Hart Stone Cold WrestleMania 13 comparisons. I thought the Sanada match today, that was also outstanding. There was some really stunning, intricate back and forth sequences. So Zack's 4 points clear of everyone else. And I think he needed that because to me, he's the ace of the block. He's a clear step above everyone else. He's put together a Wrestler of the Year resume where he's either the deserved winner of the whole G1 and goes into Wrestle Kingdom looking like the top wrestler in the company, or is going to give someone a hell of a rub by putting them over in the semis or the final. So Noah writes in and says, anyone joining the ZSJ to win it all train yet?
Hello?
Fraser.
I mean, I feel like I've been driving that fucking train since February, but okay. All right, great. Thanks for listening.
Well, I guess I just very briefly, Joel, say just a couple of things on Zack. So, of course, we've got this new format this year, right, with sort of quarters and semis, and Zack's got that number 1 spot, which means he skips the quarterfinal in Chiba and goes straight to the Ryogoku semifinal, which, you know, if we're talking kayfabe, is quite a good benefit, right? So Oka and Takagi will fight each other for the right to fight Zack. So that's quite an important advantage. One thing he started doing on this tour, which he's never done before, and I'm sure you've seen it on World, but for some of the bigger events, after he wins, he runs into the middle of the crowd and celebrates with them. And when he beat Naito, he took Naito's title with him. This is in Osaka. Unfortunately, I was on the other side of the building, so I couldn't get a nice photo of that one. But he's very, very popular. And I think the Japanese fans have really respected the foreigners like Zack, ELP, Hanade, some of these guys that have been right through the whole COVID time, didn't leave and stayed. And the other thing in Zack's favor is he's pretty good on his Japanese, his Nihongo. So they know that. And he is very, very popular as a foreign wrestler. So I think he's... we'll probably come to it later if we're talking predictions for the possible G1 winner and what the Tokyo Dome might look like. When I talk to other fans, Zack's name comes up often.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Love it. Yeah, I mean, like, I think even before February, we were somewhat pining away for Zack to have a nice little run in the summer. Whatever that means, whether that means he wins the Cup, or he won G1, or he's going to get a shot on some of these Royal Quest shows overseas, whatever it might look like, right? But we thought, okay, here's a guy that we can build around. Here's a guy that can take a next level. Here's a guy that can confidently, I don't think anyone would complain, bitch, moan if he were given that opportunity to be the top guy. No one's expecting him to carry the company, but a little taste would be really, I hate saying deserved, but just like you mentioned, it was a guy who has stuck it out through the leanest of times in New Japan when, you're wrestling in front of fucking empty seats and empty arenas and clap crowds and all of that. And yeah, there's one person that stuck through it all. I'm thrilled that he's recognized from the fans for that. Two, he's an MVP guy. He's a guy that this tournament, New Japan Cup, whenever, the middle of February to the middle of October, he's a guy that you can lean on constantly. The fact that he's atop the standings, I don't know, kind of warms my heart. But it also, I will say this as well, it does feel like we're getting set up for him giving the rub to someone else. That being said, whatever, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I think right now he is. There are two guys, and we'll talk about the other guy, but there are two MVPs that I think are head and shoulders above the rest, and he's one of them.
And Joel, just sorry, before you move on to the next wrestler, just one thing I say about Zack and all those foreign guys, which I think definitely all the Japanese that are acutely aware of, is they've definitely all been offered crazy money by AEW to go, right? And in the words of one wrestler, what those guys get paid in a week is what we get paid in a year, right? New Japan is, and Bushiroad is not in the most strong health right now. The yen is very weak. These guys, most of their bills back home are in US dollars or whatever. So it is genuinely a very significant financial sacrifice to stay. So, if you stay, you've got real passion for the company. That's another point.
All right, so second in the A block was Shingo Takagi, who had 8 points. He lost to Sanada, beat Evil and Jake Lee. The Sanada match I thought was really fantastic. Evil match was forgettable. I thought they just rehashed their previous encounters. The Jake Lee match I thought was solid. And I mean, as a side note, I bet as soon as the blocks were announced, Shingo was in Ghetto's office saying, I'm not losing to that. So he's a clear step behind Zack for me in terms of Snowflake out. But he's had a strong tournament, and it's nice to see him make the playoffs, which I think is a great spot for him where he can have a showcase match against Great Khan, make him look good. And since he had his world title run during the pandemic, I feel he's been underutilized in the tournaments. And I don't think he should go beyond Zack. And I think the Great Khan match is a coin toss. Personally, I think he should be using that to put over Great Khan. But I'm not going to die on that hill. I know others like Chris Sampson think Shingo might go on and win the whole tournament.
Yeah, from my perspective, going to the shows live, I think, and I'm fortunate enough to sit quite close to the ring most of the time, so you really get a sense of how guys are going, right? And we'll get on to some of the other guys who've maybe seem less physically impressive. The thing that stands out about Shingo is his cardio is insane, right? So he seems to have all these really long matches. He's pretty physical even on his tag days on the undercard. And I believe his daytime workout is pretty intense. So he's doing a lot of training and stuff. And I believe at nighttime, Joel, he's pretty active as well, which might be the secret to his strong cardio. But, this is supposed to be the year of the youth, right? And I think Takagi's 41, but nobody really thinks of him in the Taichi Goto Yoshihashi style camp, right? He's seen as one of the guys, maybe arguably close to the best worker still in the company. today. And I think one of the questions Japanese fans often raise is right now you've got arguably 4 of your company stars all in the same faction, Naito, Takagi, Hiromu, and Tsuji. And is there going to be a point, particularly with Naito maybe coming towards the end, where we might see something happen there? So G1 finals could be quite interesting, and I agree with you. Takagi's definitely a chance for the whole thing.
I find that amazing that he's a guy that a lot of people think is younger than he is, right? And he has a ton of miles. And if you would look at it just on the surface and you took his Dragon Gate years, I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say a dangerous style, but a lot of risk-taking moves, and it's not all mat work at that time in Dragon Gate. Can you put your finger on why you think he's been able to, and maybe he just, he's a mess backstage and he just tapes up and goes out there and becomes Superman. But like, it feels like in the cardio and all the exercising he does post and pre-match, like, can you put your finger on why it seems like he in particular seems fresher than guys that might not even have as many years as him?
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, you can categorize wrestlers maybe into 2 or 3 categories. There's the sort of strong style guys like Takagi, you could put in that boat. Ishii definitely. Shibata, maybe Hinata is a newer version of this type of wrestler. And they might, on the face of it, appear to be the most risky ones because they're beating the fuck out of each other every day. But they tend to be strikes to the body, right? So, that takes a bit of a toll, but potentially it's manageable. Then you've got a second group of wrestlers, and probably Naito and Ibushi are the best examples of this, who do quite a lot of risky spots, taking bumps around the neck and head and stuff like that. And I was there at that infamous show on January the 2nd at Noah, and I generally don't really go to any other promotions other than New Japan, but I try to get along to that January to Noah show because it's one of the biggest shows of the year. And it was quite heartbreaking, to be honest, to see what kind of condition Ibushi was in. And given I've been here 9 years, right, I feel like I've almost seen the guys who were old retire, the guys in their prime like Tanahashi and Naito have sort of got to that stage where they're really struggling now. And then you've seen the new, musketeers or whatever people would have called some of these people come through. But Ibushi, I think, is in a pretty bad place even still now. And then we'll get to Naito later, but I put him in a similar category. And then the third group is maybe guys like Tanahashi that are they're not doing too much strong style. Sometimes they are. They're not really doing a whole bunch of apron spots, but they fuck their knees jumping off the top turnbuckle, at every single house show for 30 years. And there's only one outcome that's going to come out of that when you're 30 years down the track. So I think if you categorize along style lines, ironically, unless you're doing headbutts like Shibata was, then strong style is maybe not the most risky style that you might think it is on the surface.
Okay, well, the third qualifier from A Block was Great Okan. Finished on 10 points. He beat Callum Newman, Sanada, and Naito. Let me say, for all the fans, Gokigoa, need I say more? The crowning moment of glory for the Delhi channel in the Discord. We've also managed to radicalise Walker Stewart to the Church of Gokigoa, and rightly so, because I said from night one that this man was looking in great shape. He looked focused and motivated, and now we know why. And I was sweating a bit with a 0-4 start, but I think this is one of the more effective uses of the classic Gedo losing start, comeback win storyline, because I don't think anyone would have been truly shocked to see Okan go 0-9. But even in the defeats, he looked good. And I think the Naito match was proof of concept that there is something here. And just mainly those guttural chants of Oka from it sounded like predominantly male fans. Like, he has that belief from that corner of the fan base who never gave up on him and while he may not go any further than Shingo, I think the Naito victory was a huge statement win. And, we know he's got his supporters high up in the company. So it's very encouraging to see the company beginning to tap into his potential as a cult hero.
Yeah, Khan's an interesting one. And Joe, please let me know if I should call you Joe or Nostradamus for the rest of the podcast to somehow be able to predict after 4 losses that he was going to go on and run and make the semis. That's quite an impressive prediction.
This is why I get paid the big bucks, Fraser.
Yeah, this is why we're number one. I mean,
Well, I hope you're enjoying that condo and sea views and stuff that you've got from this podcast. It must be.
I'm recording this from my yacht.
There's but one thing I would say for people who've got the time and inclination on the Western side of things, if you want to. There's a few Japanese accounts on Twitter that are worth following where I think Google Translate does do them justice. And you probably know the Tokyo Sports one, right? There's the reporter Okamoto-san, who's quite a character, and he's good mates with Naito, and he quite often writes quite amusing headlines and stuff. And he really focused on Oka during the tournament. And clearly Okamoto was told by the company what the direction of storylines are. And after 4 matches, he did a report where he said that Oka is a disgrace to the New Japan company. He should not have been in the G1. He's a source of ridicule. Then he wins his first match and becomes 1-4. And then all of a sudden the headline is Okan, who at 1-4 is virtually undefeated, is now in a very strong position. And when I saw that, I thought, maybe this prediction from Joe and Damon is actually going to become true. So I think Oka is really popular, particularly in the rural areas. He's done that whole King of Pro Wrestling gimmick, regional revitalization, which is a real thing in Japan. Population decline, everyone wants to live in Tokyo and stuff. So Oka is trying to, promote the countryside stuff. So he's seen as a very sort of grassroots guy. And I understand that he's very close with Kirani, the chairman of Bushiroad. And whenever Bushiroad do their PR stuff, they roll out some of their Stardom girls. They roll out, like Okada's wife, the voice actor, because Bushiroad's a big company, right? But Oka is often one of the New Japan wrestlers there because he loves all that otaku stuff, right? So he's quite prominent on the PR side. And I think a lot of people thought, wow, he's just there as a bit of a gimmick guy. He's never going to be treated seriously as a wrestler, and maybe Gedo's never going to book him strong. But I think everyone was really happy in the live crowd last night to see him make the quarters, if you can call it that. Whether he'll go any further, I mean, who knows? Maybe Joel and Damon, you guys seem to know what's going to happen in advance. Maybe you can tell our listeners, but I think it's great, right? Because in putting aside that he lost 4 in a row at the beginning, I think not many people would have been tipping Oka to have been one of the top 3 in that block.
Do you see a line in the sand or like a flag being planted for him in the sense of this is where it felt let's lead up to the flag being planted. It felt like this was a guy that was earmarked for great things. And then there was a time where it was, and we're probably still in it, don't get me wrong, where it's like this guy can do no right? Even though he has vocal supporters and even though it feels like much more could be done. Like, do you have in your mind a definitive, here's where things went south for him?
Well, I can distinctly remember a moment which kind of crystallized his decline, which was that infamous moment when Okada had his last match where he kindly he didn't put over anyone, right? He had a 10-man tag match with his buddies, and then Oka was standing in the aisleway holding up the King of Pro Wrestling belt, and Okada just no-sold it, right, and walked straight past him, and Oka was just standing there like an idiot while this was all going on. And I think maybe it's a case like Oka's got a judo background, right? So he's doing all those quite cool throws and stuff like that. He's a very talented mat wrestler, but I think maybe the gimmick's one of these ones where it's half good and it's half bad. He's got quite a bit of mystique the way he comes out to the ring. But then it's one of those ones where it's like, is that really a top wrestler gimmick? Is that a guy you expect to be sort of in the mix come semifinals time? And maybe not. And I think the faction United Empire is in an interesting place, right? Like Osprey's gone, and sort of who's the leader? Takeshita's tagging with them, and all sorts of things. So it's a kind of interesting time for him. But I don't know that there's been a moment where he's kind of gone south or gone north. I think he's had a bit of a gradual decline. He's always been popular, but seen probably more as a mid-card, almost comedy act, sort of man of the people type, like an early stage Honma kind of guy. But he can go, so I'm very curious to see what him versus Takagi looks like in a couple of days' time.
Any correlation between Okada leaving the company and Okan getting a push?
Well, rumor has it, Joel, that because Oka, by his own admission, is a massive otaku. And for anyone listening, I think probably everyone pretty much knows what that term is, but that's kind of Japanese code for nerd, right? But not really in a derogatory way. It's more like you've got one of the more nerdy hobbies of maybe anime or manga, pro wrestling, one of these sort of subcultures where it's a little bit nerdy. And Oka is a massive otaku. And if you follow him on Twitter, he's marking out at all these anime girls wearing bikinis and all this kind of stuff. And apparently, rumor has it was that he was quite a fan of Okada's very famous voice actress wife.
Oh, no.
And rumor has it that maybe Okada was not such a fan of the fact that Oka was a fan of his wife. So maybe Okada moving on has allowed Okan to maybe branch out a little bit and not be held down by some of the more powerful individuals within New Japan.
All right. And again, we're going to throw out the disclaimer of speculation and rumor. Of course, these are not solidified facts, but yes, interesting insight there. Absolutely. I was going to say his trip to Vegas was the downfall. All the penis pictures, the constant references to the adult entertainment industry. That might have been an issue, but what do I know? All right. Sorry, Joel. Sorry to derail.
Okay, we've got Evil, who narrowly missed out despite also having 10 points, lost to Zack, Shingo, and Shota Umino. I think Evil's been fine. I mean, he's had the whole clown car of goons coming out to help him in his matches, and your mileage may vary on that. I think he was booked fairly effectively by having him go 5-0 and then threaten to go deep in the tournament. And I mean, perhaps him losing all his remaining matches was a little bit predictable, but I mean, I'm just glad he didn't get out of the block, which is mission accomplished as far as the company concerned. And we saw Tanahashi coming out to make the save for Shota, which perhaps hints at an upcoming feud, president versus president thing. But that was Evil.
Yeah, I'd just say very briefly on Evil, I think House of Torture, which has been quite polarizing for the fan base over the last 2 or 3 years, or will go all the way back to when he sort of betrayed Naito and set up his own faction. I definitely, as a live fan, there was a period of time, a good couple of years, where I was like, fucking House of Torture, it's so predictable, you know what's going to happen in the matches, everyone's going to come out, there's going to be very little real wrestling in inverted commas to watch, and it's not that entertaining what they do the same old shit every time. But I actually think Evil, now that my Japanese is a little bit better, I can kind of understand what he says to the audience when he's getting heckled and stuff, and he's actually very, very witty. And I think there's been, when Tanahashi came out with that 10-point plan or whatever, I think everybody was expecting maybe Tanahashi or security guards to come out to stop them. They haven't really done that. But Evil's lent into the comedy side much, much more. And his matches are quite funny, actually. So this concept of him being the self-proclaimed president is quite ridiculous, right? And going on to the New Japan website, which has been down for about 3 months now. Maybe we can talk to Chris Charlton about that. But he, going into the office and telling the staff, please update the thing to show that I am the champion or whatever. I think that's all quite clever. So, Evil's a good wrestler, right? I can't remember. He wrestled somebody just 2 nights ago, but my mind is a blur. I don't remember who it was. But his last singles match before the Nagaoka one was one he went quite strong style, maybe with Takagi, I think it was. And that's when you can tell. I mean, Evil was never like the very best wrestler, but he's a pretty good one. And he can still go. So I think the comedy side is quite well received. The Japanese definitely find his routine quite funny. They didn't used to, but I think they've reading the pulse of House of Torture quite well. And I think he's far less of a painful watch than he was before.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like for me, the matches haven't been terrible by any stretch. And yes, there's plenty of nonsense. And yes, I mean, you're getting what, if you're going to go see Nine Inch Nails, I'm going to assume you're going to see a keyboard or two, right? So same thing with House of Torture in the sense of you know what you're going to get. But even then, I love the fact that, as we had hoped, he's a guy that is being used as being the ultimate heel, and hopefully people can get a rub from beating him and making the fans happy in that case. And to do that, unfortunately, you're going to have him collect some points, whether it be early, late, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, he's there to help establish new stars or give somebody that special gold star in the tournament that might not be in the finals or semifinals. So, yeah, I honestly haven't had that much problem with him. He hasn't been an instant fast forward for me. Am I collecting the Best of Evil compilation to put up on XW? No, I'm not. But in the same breath, it hasn't been anywhere near as torturous, pardon the pun, of sitting through his matches. I think he's been fine, and he's played his role very well.
We have Tetsuya Naito, who also landed on 10 points and lost out on tiebreakers. He beat Shota Umino and Callum Newman and then lost to Great-O-Khan. I think Naito had a shaky start with a handful of ugly botches earlier in the tournament, but he really pulled it together by the end, and I think overall had a solid tournament. I think he's a really great opponent for O-Khan. He put him over in the New Japan Cup opening round back in 2021, I think it was. That was a very good match, and main event today was another big spot where I just thought he was a really good foil for O-Khan, accentuated all his strengths. And Naito these days tends to look better in matches against those slower, more methodical opponents. And he did an excellent job here, making O-Khan look like a killer. So I thought he ended the tournament quite strongly.
Yeah, for me, Naito's a bit of a sad one. Because if I think about my sort of tenure of watching New Japan, sort of roughly 2015 to today, I think back to 2016, one of the most memorable matches, I think, of the 9 years I've been watching was the semi-final against Kenny Omega, 2016 G1 semi-final, the year that Kenny won. And that was an insanely good match between two incredibly good wrestlers. And back then, when Naito was, I don't know, probably early 30s, something like that, he was very springy, very athletic. He could do a lot of jumps. His balance was incredible. He was a very smooth wrestler, and he was great to watch. Now, it's very clear we're coming towards the end with Naito, and I think what's important about him, and I'm sure you guys have heard it, is he's quite vocal when it comes to promos about, what the company should be doing. He always used to say when the G1 was 20 people, he said that's too many. 16 is a truly elite field, this kind of thing. And one thing he has said all the time, and I believe it still to be true to this day, he said that once he feels he's gone past his peak, he will retire. He doesn't intend to be one of the dads like Tenzan or whatever and sort of basically struggling to walk to the ring. He's going to retire. And I personally think, and I've got no scoops on this whatsoever, that maybe next year could be it for Naito. And when I watched live, I mean, it was clear, especially in the first couple of matches, his balance was really bad, right? Like, he was in a really bad shape. Like, the Destino's pretty painful to watch because, 50% of the time he's fucking it up. A lot of the spots he used to do, he can't anymore because his balance is no good. Remember, he always used to get guys in the corner, sort of sweep the leg and then sort of jump over into the corner and sort of kick them in the midsection. He doesn't do that anymore. And then one match in particular, and maybe there's some sandbagging going on, I don't know, was Jake Lee. That was a shocking match, that one. Like right at the beginning of the match, Jake did just a normal Irish whip or whatever, and Naito went to the ropes. But Naito couldn't even run to the ropes properly. He looked like what Ibushi looked like on January the 2nd. So I think fans were really concerned, and they all know his knees are toasted. For the first 3 or 4 matches, thinking, shit, maybe he should be pulling out. He's really in no condition to wrestle, which is really bad for New Japan because he's their one draw right now, right? He's the one guy can sell tickets to a big event like Dominion or Tokyo Dome or something. So they need him healthy. But I agree with what Joel said, though, that as the tournament's gone on, he's got a lot better. He's got himself into good condition. I think he's realizing the limitations of what he can and can't do. So he's more methodical. A lot of that sort of network type stuff he's doing. So I think it's okay. But I think it's a good thing he didn't make the quarters. So he can rest up a bit more. And assuming, and it is an assumption, who knows what's going on in Kikuchi-san's mind and Gedo's mind right now, that he's going to be main eventing Dome, then you need him to have some time off or at least be working easier matches so he's in a state to put on a decent match come January 4th.
Is he a guy in your mind that can change up styles quickly in the sense of, and I'll give you the Liger analogy because that's near and dear to my heart, where, he made a conscious decision to kind of change up a style, still do light heavyweight stuff, but certainly not anywhere near as, the stuff he was doing maybe pre-injury when he broke his ankle or even the tumor that was removed. Do you see him being that kind of guy where or almost like a Tanahashi where, again, it's smart, it's methodical, as opposed to maybe the guy that might be a little bit more known, not maybe as methodical, but more of I'm going to hit these big moves when the time is appropriate?
I'd say for the most part, yes, he has adapted. Think of some of the moves that he does now that he never really used to do. He's got that one where he just repeatedly elbows the opponent's neck, sort of getting ready for the Destino. He has that neck breaker where he has a long pause before he drops it. So he's doing those kind of moves. But the one he hasn't changed yet, which I think is even at his prime, was a pretty awkward move to pull off and relies a lot on the opponent to get it right, is a Destino. And if you kind of watch it sort of in a more non-kayfabe sense, you can kind of see the opponent waiting. If it's a running Destino, kind of waiting to pick him up, hoist him up, and then sort of Naito dead weights the other guy down. It's a pretty dangerous move because if a guy lands on his head, and I know one or two have in this G1, it's pretty dangerous. And, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say almost half the time in this tournament, he hasn't hit it crisply. He's either fucked it up completely or it's been pretty awkward. And I kind of wonder after this tournament whether he might give thought to perhaps a different finisher, because I think his balance in particular is not good. Destino relies a lot on balance, so maybe he'd be better off thinking of a different finisher. That would be
okay. So we see it. You see it at ringside. Is this just a case of a guy being stubborn?
Well, Naito is a very, very smart wrestler, though, right? He's very opinionated about the direction of the company outside. I told you before, he was quite adamant that when his time is up, he's going to retire. So I don't think he's the kind of guy that's just going to say, I'm going to fight on until I'm 50 and fucking can't walk or anything like that. But why he hasn't changed it to Destino, I don't know. There were a few Japanese fans who were wondering whether he was kind of playing up the extent of his knee injuries early on just to sort of get crowd sympathy. But that's the one part that doesn't really make sense to me, because the Destino is really looking pretty ugly at the moment the majority of the time. To be fair, like yesterday, he hit it pretty well. But I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me, let's say, between now and January 4, if he comes up with a new finisher, which is one that relies less on balance. I would not be surprised. But I don't think he's a stubborn.
Chinlock.
Chinlocks?
Very tight headlock, yeah.
I'm keen on the money clip, Joel. I mean, that was a massive success. So why not? No, I don't say that. Okada's gone.
I love it.
Right. Let's move on to Jake Lee then, who's on 8 points. He beat Gabe and Shota and then lost to Shingo. I think I'm just about sold on Jake. He won me over towards the end of the tournament. I thought the Gabe match was excellent. The Shota match was good. He's a guy who clearly thrives against opponents who will bring the pace and the intensity to him, and he's allowed to play off of that with his more methodical style. And I like his moveset. I like that big knee does to the gut. That's a really great tide turner move to sort of flip the dynamics of the match. I'm not sure what the future holds for Jake, like which promotion he's going to end up at. Is he going to stick around New Japan? He's going back to Nerd. But I can see the value in keeping him around as a mid-carder at least.
Yeah, for me, Jake falls into the category of very much outsider, right? In so many levels. He's come from All Japan and Noah, so he's not really a New Japan guy. Japanese Korean, there's also another dimension to it. I personally think he's a very talented wrestler. Like, he's a big guy by Nihonjin or Japanese standards. He's very athletic. He can move around very quickly, and he's got some quite impressive power moves like that knee to the gut you're talking about, the kind of choke slam thing that he does. And I think when his opponent kind of pisses him off, sort of the boot to the head or whatever, while he's on the ground, he can get really aggressive and angry. I think charisma, a little bit like Sonata, he struggles a little bit, which is maybe where his problem is he a perfect fit for War Dogs? Who knows? But being Japanese society and he's Korean, he is kind of an outsider. So that does kind of make sense. But personally, I've been pretty impressed by him. I know there's a lot of fans out there that are not so hot on Jake, but I think he's been pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I hate to just tap out and give you the old, well, you're getting Jake Lee. Jake Lee is Jake Lee. I don't know. Like, a lot of times when you get into situations where, okay, this guy is definitely an outsider and definitely representing an outside company, and he has that aura and feel. It's still not as much of a square peg through a round hole as it is with this. Like, I just don't know if G1 is even the proper vehicle for him to kind of catch his momentum in this company. I don't know. I don't know if he's a great fit. Look, I don't know what they're paying the guy, and I would assume it's more than what he would be getting at a Noah or in All Japan. I'm assuming. Even with that said, though, I don't know if is the value there as Jake Lee as a mid card guy. I would think that we would want him to be at least upper mid card, if not in main events. And I don't know if he's that type of guy. And then I guess the next question would be, like, is that a misstep on management side to say, okay, we're going to invest in this guy, knowing full well that I don't think he has New Japan main event in him.
Yeah, I guess the very last thing I'd say, Joel, before you move on to the next person is, reality is New Japan and Bushiroad's financial situation is pretty tight, right? So if you're going to go splurge a little bit of cash to bring somebody new in, and we've got a massive hole at the top right now, as these young guys are moving up quickly, but it still takes time. I guess the question to ask is, if you've got that money lying around, is Jake Lee the best person to spend it on? I think that's the question to think about.
Okay, next wrestler to discuss is Sanada, who finished with 8 points. He beat Shingo and then lost to Great Okan and Zack. Here's a hot take for you. I think Sanada's G1 was better than his entire world title reign last year. He had a bit of a sleepy start, but the back half, in particular the Shingo and the Zack matches, were excellent. The latter, the Zack match, I thought was a genuine match of the tournament candidate. And I've got to hand it to Sanada. Like, maybe it's a case where when the pressure, the spotlight's off him, he performs better, or he's raised his game to match the vibe in the company right now, or he's just been given better opponents to work with, but he looks motivated, he's got the fire. Sloppy Sanada, nowhere to be seen, and it's just a shame he didn't have a run like this when he was champion, or wasn't given opponents of the quality of Shingo and Zack during his title run, because I think we would look back on that reign very differently had they maybe been a bit more bold with the choice of challengers for him.
Yes, Sanada for me. charisma void, I think, is a problem. And it's a shame, actually, because I mentioned that group of doctors, nurses, and stuff that I used to hang out with before Corona times. And one of those doctors, who's a pretty crazy guy, he's an alcoholic and sort of doing surgery
No.
the next day. And there's no way his hangover had passed. So this is a bit concerning, but he was obsessed with Sonata to the point that the other doctors and nurses used to joke that he wanted to marry Sonata, which he may well have wanted to, who knows. But as a consequence of knowing those guys, I actually went out with Sonata quite a few times. This is a number of years ago. Went to karaoke bars and stuff like that. And outside of wrestling, he's got a very sort of cheeky personality. He's quite witty, quite funny. But then when he's in the ring, he seems to lack charisma. And for me, character-wise, that sort of cold skull character he came in it was perfect for him. Because if you've got no personality, then be a cold skull guy. Don't really say anything. Don't do much. Be a heel. Just do your moveset and sort of be in a cool faction. And I think that worked for him. I think in just 5 guys, as a baby face, doing the Paradise Lock and jumping over the ropes and doing the Hogan Air Cup stuff, it just feels a little bit forced for me. I think the only match that really took my interest of Sonata was the one you referred to, Joel, which was last night against Zack. Those two, I think, outside of the ring know each other pretty well. Sonata does get off on the chain wrestling style of Zack, so those two can have good matches together. But for me, in a year that's been pretty exciting, Sonata's been Sonata.
Why do you? I mean,
Do you think he might be a better fit in a different faction?
I just personally think, like, go back to being the Cold Skull guy, right? Like, Cold Skull, like, you could translate as no personality, right? And it's a bit harsh because again, outside of that, especially once he's been drinking a bit, and he's quite a drinker, he's one of the most charismatic individuals and funny individuals you can meet. But inside the ring, he just really is a charisma vacuum. So Cold Skull character for me is the right one.
how does that not translate, though? I mean, again, everybody gets a little bit more charismatic with a couple pops in them, but
Mm.
like, what? Why do you think that is? Do you think he's just more relaxed in a casual environment and he can kind of let his hair down, so to speak, and maybe he's uncomfortable in the ring? I would find it hard to believe, being given it his experience. But like, can you put your finger on that?
Yeah, I think I can actually. I think it's a self-confidence issue. So he's basically like kind of winding back the clock about 5 years before COVID on these sort of nights out I used to have with him and this alcoholic doctor.
That is amazing. I am never going to get medical service in Japan ever.
Well, to be fair, actually, the Japanese medical system is very good, but
All right.
before you get any surgery,
Just look for this particular guy as you're wheeled into the ambulance. Just say, "Do you like Sonata?"
him and
If
Sonata,
they say yes, you're like, "I want a different doctor."
like at 4 a.m. in the morning, him and Sonata would be chopping it back. It'd be like Wednesday or something, right? He's booked in for surgery on 10 a.m. the next day or something like
Oh,
that.
my
And
God.
they'd be joking around how he might remove the wrong organ or something because he's too
Oh,
precious
Jesus.
and stuff. But anyway, that's for another time. But Sonata like was quite open that back then he was in the LIJ unit, right? He's probably number 3. This is before Takagi came. Like Naito was number 1. Evil was there before Sonata, and Sonata came in, and sort of Sonata felt like he doubted himself, and he would say, just as a person, not really as a wrestler, I don't know that I can make it that well. And back then my Japanese wasn't very good, but his English was pretty good from his days in TNA. So he was thinking maybe he might be better off in sort of WWE. But I generally think it is quite strange to think like this, but wrestlers have their own confidence issues as well. And I think he's just a bit insecure. And that's why he comes off a bit unnatural when he's sort of, trying to get the crowd amped up. He just doesn't have the self-confidence. Even now, even after a year of being the champion, you can still see that there's still elements of his character that suggest he's not totally buying his own hype.
Now I feel bad for hating him. I don't hate him, but
Hating. That's a strong word, Damon. I think
I don't hate him.
as a bald fan, you should not be hating wrestlers, okay?
All right. I don't like him in the ring. All right. Sorry, Joel. Who else we got in this block of winners?
Gabe Kidd, 8 points. He lost to Jake Lee, lost to Zack, and then beat Callum Newman. Gabe is my A block MVP. Ooh. Despite only having 8 points, I think he's raised his stock the most out of anyone in the entire field of the 20 entrants. And I was high on him to start with. He gave Jake Lee his best match of the tournament with a wild brawl that had some great heel versus heel dynamics. The Zack match was probably his standout performance in the tournament, where he channeled that stone cold adjacent dark hero energy with heart and guts and defiance, refusing to tap. There was that brilliant visual at the end of him flipping off the crowd before Zack snared his arms to the finish. And he's won over the fans who are all chanting his name. And I just think this is the man who is the real spiritual successor to Shibata, and an ironic twist considering all the shit he talks about him. So with Gabe, I think it's just a question of when, not if. Whenever the company decides to pull the trigger, he's him. He's the guy. He's going to be the generational foreign rival for you guys like Tsuji and Yuya and Oiwa and Shota. And our friend Manabu put it best. He texted me yesterday. He said Gabe is like Stan Hansen, Tiger Jeet Singh and Dynamite Kid in one person. And he just gets it. So question here from Mark says, Gabe Kidd, Bullet Club leader when? Every match of his has been must-see and he's utterly magnetic, while I find David Finlay's tough guy routine very forced. So Fraser, talk to us about Gabe Kidd.
Yeah, if I was to use one word for Gabe Kidd, and it's actually a word that Tsuji used, it would be passion, right? So I don't know if you caught a promo that Tsuji did, I think around about the time that the G1 started. Tsuji said that in his opinion, there's 3 wrestlers who love Japan the most. One of them, being Tsuji, was himself, of course. Very objective, independent assessment. He said, interestingly, the other 2, though, that he pointed out were Gai Kokujin, foreigners, Gabe Kidd, and Hinade. And he said, these are the 3 guys that care about the company the most. And if you see, like, it's just gone up on Twitter now, like at 4 a.m. in the morning, waking up for Damon's 5 a.m. call that he kindly scheduled for me, I was browsing Twitter and I came across... who did he fight? Callum Newman, right? And he basically said, like, wrestling is all about passion. He said, you can do all your flippy, shitty moves and stuff, but if you don't have heart and you don't believe in the lion market, everything like that, you can fuck off to another company, basically. And, you know, those guys, obviously, both being British, know each other pretty well. I think he is definitely... You know, there's an obvious WWE analogy we could make, but I'll try and steer clear of that and just say he's got that anti-hero vibe totally. And as far as the Japanese fandom goes, they're fully in behind that. So the only thing I've found a bit interesting about him character-wise, having gone to all the shows, is there's been a few nights where he's really leant into it. So he's kind of let the crowd cheer for him and he's kind of almost half encouraged them. Whereas other nights he seems to come out in a worse mood and he's like telling them, you know, middle finger, fuck off, don't cheer for me kind of thing. So it feels like it's a bit of a slow burn towards this anti-hero stuff. And once it happens, I just don't think it's a question of, you know, everyone's obviously talked about Finlay or Gabe being the leader of the Bullet Club. Kind of be like just directionally, where does he go? Does he become a babyface? Does he stay with the War Dogs or Bullet Club? I don't know. I think he's incredibly charismatic. His promos are just insane. And, you know, he's had his mental health issues in the past. And sometimes those kind of really creative people do struggle with that type of thing. And it can be both a burden and a blessing at the same time. And I think he's an incredible talent. If you ask me, who got a few less points than maybe what I might have thought they would have got this time around, Gabe's one of those. It wouldn't have surprised me to see him to go through the top 3. I said before that Oka is a Kidani guy. Apparently Gabe is a Kidani guy. Kidani loves Gabe. So I was a little bit surprised to see that he was not live going into the last match. But most of your listeners are pretty much watching everything. But a match I would recommend you do watch if you haven't seen it let's go back to around about February, just before the dog pound match. There was a build-up match where he had a one-on-one match with Hinare, Korakuen Hall. That was kind of a passion type match. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Gabe, and we'll talk about another individual going in the opposite direction at the moment, but he's a heel who's becoming an anti-hero, and the Japanese are behind it. And I think he's got massive upside. He's another one who would have turned down big offers from AEW to stay where he is because he loves the company.
Yeah. 3 points I want to quickly make, Joel. One, I love the fact that he's able to channel whatever demons that he has into a pro wrestling character. And to me, that feels a lot more healthy than other options that might be on the table to help soothe those and quiet those demons. Two, it's genuine with him. And I think that translates tenfold. You mentioned passion. Yes, he has that tenfold. But also that passion comes across as genuine. And there's nothing worse than kind of seeing through that and being like, ugh, okay, dude, get up the street with this. You know, it's not from the heart, and it definitely is. And I guess the question I have for you, Frage, is do you think he's like, what's the feeling of him in general that you're aware of behind the curtain, in the sense of I can probably point to 2 or 3 times where you might have an individual who is so into his character, we'll say, that it rubs people the wrong way behind the curtain. How is he viewed behind the curtain?
I think there's 2 things to mention. So I'm going to be a little bit careful on not talking outside of school too much, but it's fair to say Gabe enjoys being out on the town, out and about. He does a fair amount of that. And rumor has it that maybe the timing of some of those nights out was not too far away from when he had a match the next day. And in fact, I believe some Japanese wrestlers complained to management along those lines. Whether that's real or not, who knows? That's point number 1. Point number 2, which I think is a serious one for him to think about, is he's injured a lot of people, right? Since he in the last year or so, like not intentionally, of course, but if you're going to be a madman, you're going to throw tables around or suplex Eddie Kingston onto the barriers or something like that, you should keep safety in mind a little bit. And Hinare's injury that he got was a pretty gruesome one, right? Like, I think thankfully the actual photos of what happened to his skull didn't get out there, but you know, he's built from DNA that the 3 of us are not, and somehow not only lived to tell the tale, but patched himself up and was back in the ring doing chair shots to him like 20 minutes later. But, you know, he threw that table at Hinare at a very awkward angle, right? There was no way. Like, if you throw a table, not that I'm a wrestler or throw tables or anything like that, but you should throw it in a way where it's easy for the person to block it, right? But he threw it at such an angle that kind of like the corner of it hit Hinare straight on the top of his skull, right? And split him open straight away. And that was a serious injury. And as you know, Hinare was out for, 4 or 5 months, and WWE rumors and all that, and people wondering if he's even going to come back. And I'm sure, wrestling being wrestling, they'll lean into that down the line, and those 2 have good chemistry together. But then he fucked up Eddie Kingston pretty bad, like suplexing him in. And I'm not sure if I really watched that match, or if I didn't watch it too closely. But I mean, Eddie Kingston's leg hit the guardrail quite comfortably, right? He just didn't nick it. So that's maybe the part he's got to be a little bit careful about. I mean, it's all good to be a madman, but at the end of the day, you got to look after the guy that you're in the ring with, and that's probably the part for Gabe that he's got to be a bit careful about.
All right, let's move on to talk about Shota Umino, who has 8 points, who lost to Naito, Jake Lee, and beat Evil at the end. I mean, for Shota, I think the work has been solid, but as I keep saying, he's missing that emotional hook with the fans. And I don't want to perpetuate the trope of him just copying things from other guys, but he needs his Naito moment. Like when Naito declared himself the Shuyaku, the fans weren't buying it. They turned on him that year, and he turned on them. Ended up going to Mexico, came back as this bitter little prick who used all that negative energy in his favour. And similarly, Shota declared himself the new ace earlier this year during New Beginning. But he doesn't feel like an ace to me. He doesn't look like he believes it either. The fans certainly don't. Now, can Shota do what Naito did and reinvent himself? That I don't know. I don't know if he has that in him. And the way he's been booked as in this tournament here at the end, the guy who finally foiled the dastardly evil and House of Torture, that isn't going to work. That's not going to win over the fans. He's not got the pure babyface heart and energy of someone like Yuya Uemura. He's an entitled little prick. And if the company try to square peg him into that round hole, it's going to fail. Now, I doubt the company will do this, but if I were in charge, I'd send him away for 6 months. Tell him, do a chunky. Tell him, figure out what you do.
Yeah, there were two wrestlers out of the 20 that I wanted to talk a bit more about character-wise. We just covered off Gabe Kidd. He was the first. The other one going in exactly the opposite direction is Shota, right? Booked as the ultimate baby face, almost politician style, coming out, kissing babies, waving around, flashing pin lights, dressed up in white gear, high-fiving every single member of the audience. But in reality, I would say he's wrestled 9 singles matches now. I've been to all of them, as my raspy voice can attest to. I reckon there's only 2 matches out of those 9 where the audience cheered for him more than his opponent. Those 2, one was Evil, who you would kind of expect whoever Evil was fighting, they're going to cheer for the other person. And the other one was Jake Lee, the sort of evil outsider, the Korean guy from Noah and All Japan at Yokohama. They fought, and I got what I thought was quite a good photo of Jake giving the crowd the middle finger after he won and knocked Shota out of the tournament. I totally agree with what you're saying, Joel. Like, character-wise, like this whole uber babyface thing is not working at all. And the crowd are sort of actively booing him. And one way I can measure the popularity of wrestlers is based on the number of likes I get for photos I take. And in general, you could say there's probably 3 things. I only use a crappy iPhone, but I'm close to the ring, which counts in my favor. But ordinarily, there's probably 3 things that define how popular a photo is. One is, what is the moment that you capture? I can't capture, like, Will Ospreay doing some super fast move on an iPhone. It's got to be more of a so-called moment, or as Damon would mention, a WrestleMania moment, being a WWE fan that he is. That's one element to it. The second element is obviously up to me, which is the quality of the image. Is the lighting and everything good? But the third thing that defines popularity is who is the subject of the photo. And there are certain wrestlers, and ELP is probably a good example of this, and I know he polarizes a lot of the foreign fan base, but Japanese fans love him. If I post something, and arguably it's a little bit cheesy of ELP, it'll get a ton of likes. But Shota, if I take good photos of Shota and post them, and I think just purely as a photo, it's high quality, I guess no traction. And I can tell that he hasn't got many fans. Actually, before the show yesterday, I went with a couple of girls to a ramen place, and one of them was a big Shota fan, and me and the other girl were joking to her that she's the only adult who supports Shota, because it's all the little kids that he gives, his bracelet to, whatever, that like him, and nobody else does. So I think he's set up for, going down that kind of dark ace type avenue would be the best place, I think, for him. And I suppose, again, if we're talking a little bit out of school, he's incredibly unpopular backstage for a couple of reasons. One, there's a silver spoon theory, which is Red Shoes is his dad, and you might think a referee doesn't have much power, but in reality, Red Shoes is quite a powerful individual in New Japan. So there are many people that...
Sorry, Fraser, can I just jump in at this moment? This really good stuff to tell the wrestling aggregator websites to fuck right off. Don't even think about transcribing and aggregating this.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Thank
Hey,
you.
but
Thank
Joel, in their defense, you do realize how long it takes to transcribe the words of other people, right?
you. Yeah, fuck
And
right off.
if you get a hash, or if you get a reference in an embedded web link or whatever, and it's all the way down the bottom, you're guaranteed that everyone's gonna read that full article and realize it was you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't want to
Good.
turn over, but just quickly on the backstage stuff. Yeah, so he's kind of got that Nepo baby heat. But on top of that, and again, I probably need to choose my words a little bit carefully. Let's just say Shota's treatment of women is maybe not reputably supposed to be the best. And Shota seems to have a penchant for other wrestlers' girlfriends. And that's plural. It's not just one, but I've heard of at least 2 stories of where he has shown interest in girlfriends of other wrestlers. And you made some allusions to a match earlier in the tournament where maybe there was a bit more spice and heat in that match because of a reason sort of along these lines. And there is actually another individual who I kind of got to know a little bit, who absolutely hates Shota and says the next time he gets in a ring with him, he's going to beat the fuck out of him. I won't say anything more than that, but he's not popular with the crowd. He's not popular backstage. That all adds up to heel for me.
Wow. Interesting stuff, Fraser. Is
Reddit can fuck off as well.
right. Go down the line. With that being said, though, do you think that there is pushback that is so loud that the company can ignore it, or are they just sticking their fingers in their ears and la 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 la, and we're going straight ahead with Shooter?
No, actually, and the reason I say that is because he got knocked out pretty early, right? Like he didn't make it to the final night; he was already dead. So in Yokohama, when Jake Lee beat him, and that was maybe arguably a little bit of a surprise at the time, he was gone, right? So, for being supposed to be one of the 3 musketeers, and whether that's really a term anymore or even was at the beginning, he hasn't exactly been showered with a whole bunch of responsibility. So I think the company itself have maybe cooled off on him a little bit. I mean, things can change quite quickly, but he got knocked out before the last night, and generally speaking, both blocks have been sort of parity booked. So if you're knocked out before the end, maybe that suggests that you're not as hot as you might think you are.
And I will say this, Joe, before we continue, that this is not just a gentleman just kind of spouting off opinions. I mean, we're getting firsthand information in many cases. So great job by you uncovering all that. That's very interesting details that you have shared with not only us, but our audience, for sure.
Does corroborate a lot of stuff we've heard independently as well. So
yeah, you guys seem to have some magical sources. I don't know who you're talking to, but yeah, I mean, for me, just physically being here in Japan, right? You just, whether it's on the Shinkansen or at hotels and stuff, and the rest is all pretty friendly. Like, I don't try and be a dick and sort of run up to people and ask for autographs or selfies or anything like that. I just try and leave them alone. And I think as a consequence of that, when you do sort of end up meeting up with them, they're all pretty generous with their time and all that. So you do tend to hear 1 or 2 stories. But anyway, we should continue on just to make sure it's not going to be a 5-hour podcast, I guess.
5 hours.
Right, last person in A block, Callum Newman, 4 points, lost to Great Okan, Naito and Gabe. He's not delivered what I think Yoshihashi or Taichi would have delivered if they'd had his spot. But like I've said, he's an investment in the future. I think the company were right to include him, and he's been okay. He's been good. I think he's got a lot of growth to do technically and narratively to, at the right time, move away from the Ospreay stuff. And there's a noisy chunk of the Western fan base seem locked in on the opinion that he's irredeemably bad. But I disagree. I think he's had an encouraging debut tournament. He's kept up physically. He's not had any matches completely fall apart or anything. And, the key thing is he can absolutely hang at this level. He's got plenty to learn, but I think he's got the right attitude. I'm confident he's going to make it.
Yeah, I'd say a couple of quick things on him. To me, he's probably the biggest beneficiary of this whole youth movement this year. I think if it had been any other year, he wouldn't have got in. And that's not bagging him. That's just stating fact, I think. And credit to him. And I did see him sort of recently, just sort of walking by in the corridor or something like that, and we had a quick chat. And I said something to be very proud of, right? Like he's the youngest ever wrestler to enter the G1, and he's entering in back to the old school format, right? Because that whole 28-32, you wrestle 7 or 8 matches, 9 singles matches in a row is much harder. Maybe when you're 21 and your body's much better, it's fine. But he was hurting, and talking about Destinos that hurt and stuff. And you go back and watch him versus Naito, and you'll see he lands quite squarely on his head, and then he backed that up by getting pile driven by Gabe about 4 times in a row, and one into a chair. So hopefully he's not a paraplegic now. But I think with him, you could argue maybe a little bit too much too soon. I don't know. He's been okay, and I agree with you, Joel. Certainly an investment in the future. But backstage, I think if you asked most of the wrestlers what trade would you have made for the 20-man field, and this is not bagging Callum at all, right? Like Will Ospreay came out in his defense, and I thought it was an excellent tweet that he sent out, and sort of I supported the sentiment there. But I think the majority of wrestlers...
Will Ospreay, excellent tweet. Like how far we've come, Fraser.
What was that? Sorry.
Right.
Will Ospreay, excellent tweet.
That's true. That's true. Like maybe wind back the clock 5 years ago, and yes, Will was not necessarily the best of tweeters, but he's matured somewhat since then, and I'm sure that the same thing will happen to Callum. In fairness, from the very, very limited amount of time I've really spent talking to him, he seems very level-headed, very mature, not egotistical. He's not one of these guys who's come in and sort of said, I'm a G1 at 21, I'm the man. He's got none of that vibe about him. But I do think, majority backstage wrestlers, if you ask them, they would probably say Tai Chi for Callum this year is maybe the comment.
I would tend to agree that a guy like Yoshihashi or Tai Chi, you know what? Given their history and who they are and what they can do, I think that's the easy thing to say of, okay, maybe the kid should have sat out this year and had them in and wait till next year or maybe even further. But I'll say this. I think the benefit of having him in is greater than having a Tai Chi or a Yoshihashi, because what you got with those two guys. And with Callum, you really don't. And if he's going to get his feet wet, and he's going to, if we're trying to establish him and have him go up a rung or 2 or 3 or 12 levels, whatever, like it's got to start somewhere. And why not here? And I would rather see Callum Newman take, 4 points or 2 points or wherever he's at right now. And have him learn and develop and grow, as opposed to, okay, Tai Chi gets 4. Or would we be happy with that? Yoshihashi? Okay, maybe. I don't know. But I just think that the value of having him in and growing and learning in this environment is tenfold more advantageous to New Japan and him than having Tai Chi in, just because we'll have better matches. Okay. Well, sometimes you gotta invest to cash out, and consider this part an investment.
All right, let's move on to B block then. David Finlay is at the top. He's got 10 points. He lost to Goto, beat Jeff Cobb, and faces ELP in his last match. I've enjoyed his tournament so far. I still think we're missing that consensus standout match, but that may be just around the corner. If nothing else, I've enjoyed him just roughhousing the opposition, powerbombing them out of their boots. And, of course, there is history with ELP, notably that Dominion match last year where he basically squashed ELP. Whether or not he makes it through, it's a bit of a coin toss to me. I could see that going both ways, because obviously Finlay is a guy that the company are keen on. He's Bullet Club leader, and you'd expect him to get through, but that does look like a rather large ELP-shaped banana peel on the floor there.
Yeah, I think for me, Finlay... yeah, his really aggressive offensive moveset and, that sort of tendency to powerbomb the fuck out of everybody and throw them around the ring has looked really impressive. And I think the Japanese fans definitely respect that. I think one thing I find a bit curious about him is he does really good shit talking in the ring. Like when he was fighting Takeshita, he's like, "Oh, you're just a fucking DDT guy. Like, what are you doing here?" and stuff like that. And then he was talking to Yuya and saying, "Oh, they didn't even make you one of the Three Musketeers. You must feel pretty disappointed about that." And then he won the main event. I think it was in Yamaguchi. I can't remember who it was against, but he got given the mic, and he's been in Japan for quite a while, right? And if you know Japanese fans, especially in the countryside, Yamaguchi's sort of more in the countryside, you have to speak slow in English. Don't do Dolph Ziggler style screaming into the microphone. Or Jay White used to do this a little bit as well, because the reality is half the audience don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And he did a really fast speaking promo, and no one knew what he's talking about. And that was quite. I don't know if New Japan World picked it up or not, but that was the night where he said, "You tell me who in this company is better than me." And somebody yelled out, I'm pretty sure it was a Japanese person, maybe it was a random foreigner sitting somewhere at the back, I don't know. But they said straight away, "Everybody." And I just laughed, and no one else really laughed because they didn't understand the English. But I thought that was quite funny. I think that's maybe the charisma, sort of mic skills part that maybe he's missing. And unfortunately for him, you've got Gabe Kidd in the same unit who could not be more of a pro at that part of it. And that's maybe what's holding him back a little bit. But I think he's a fantastic wrestler in ring. And that lack of mic skills combined with a body that doesn't quite aesthetically please absolutely everybody, and on top of that, being, head of the Bullet Club, and you've got very lofty names sort of ahead of that, he's always been on a bit of a hiding to nothing. But my prediction would be that he'll get the number one spot of B Block, go straight through to the semi-final. I mean, I'm just speculating, but that would be my expectation. So I expect he'll go pretty deep. I reckon it'll beat ELP, but fuck, who knows? Bolton bet Takeshita the other night, which is the beauty of this tournament. You don't know what's going to happen.
Can I just quickly jump in before, Damon, you give your thoughts on Finlay? With while you're on the topic of English wrestlers giving promos in front of a Japanese crowd, you might remember this, Fraser. I think it was Dominion 2019 when Jon Moxley had the match with Shota, and then afterwards cut a promo, and he was saying, "I've come here from Cincinnati, Ohio," and then there's a clutch of Japanese fans went, "Ohio!"
Yeah.
He was wishing them good morning.
No, they always do that, right? So yeah, when you go into the office or whatever, or even if you see your neighbor, "Ohayo gozaimasu," foreigners, if there's probably 2 words they learn, well, maybe 3 words they learn at the beginning, "konnichiwa," and everyone kind of learns that even before they come. "Arigato" or "arigato gozaimasu," thank you. And then "ohayo gozaimasu," morning. So Cincinnati, Ohio. And the crowd every single time was like, "Ohayo." So they all get quite excited when they actually recognize a word that, makes sense to them. But I think that's something that certain foreign wrestlers, even ones like people like Zack, the dare I say more high EQ guys, they'll get that. And they'll speak slower. And I know from my Japanese, just at a personal level, getting better, and my Japanese on an absolute level is still shit, but I can do conversational Japanese quite easily. And the way that you do that with limited Japanese is you speak slowly, whether you're using Japanese or English. And once you get to the countryside, and I was telling my language school, because they kindly allowed me to go off and watch pro wrestling for a month, I told them that, the best renshu or practice has actually been going in the countryside, because nobody speaks English, right? So you've got to rely on whatever Japanese that you know. But for someone like Finlay, and I'm just using it as an example, if you're going to cut a promo in the middle of the fucking countryside, speaking English at 1,000,000 miles an hour, that's like a bad move, dude. Maybe in Tokyo, where more people speak English, that's fine. But out in the countryside, no one knew what the fuck he was doing. So then Gedo would come in and say, the world needs a rebel and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of saves him a little bit. But just being a bit more smart around that kind of stuff would help. And I would, to be honest, maybe I'm being harsh, but Finley's been here for about 10 years. He should know better by now.
I agree. Fraser gave me a great hint when it came to romantic time with my missus. He was like, just say sumimasen. And you're in. No, he never said that. Why would he say that? Preposterous. All right. Sorry, Joel. Please continue.
We've got Ren Narita on 10 points, who beat Yuya and Henare and faces Takeshita on the final night. So I think Ren's offered a different flavour of heel to evil. He won't bring out the clown card, but he'll find a way to bend the rules in his favour. He's been okay, but just by the nature of, I think, has been a very strong tournament overall, he'd probably land in, like the bottom 5 for my personal enjoyment. I mean, he's a mid-card heel. Not everyone can be the future Acer, and I think this spot is fine for him right now. I think he's a fun final hurdle for Takeshita, but I really don't think Ren should be making the playoffs at Takeshita's expense.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe hold a personal grudge against Narita now. So coming from New Zealand, right, like Hinata is somebody that I would follow as a fellow Kiwi. So I think, fuck, I spent all this money traveling around all Japan, watching him valiantly fight strong style and winning some, losing some. And then it came to, where was it? Sendai. And that was when I was really tired, right? And like missing Shinkansen and leaving my suitcase behind and all that. So I wasn't in the best of moods. And fucking hell, I thought so much before the show. I thought, Hinade's going over here. I thought he'll definitely end up on 8 points, and I fully expected him there. I never expected him to make the quarters or anything. I'm not blind, but I thought as never champion, he'd probably end up on 10 points, and then he's basically lost to all the top guys, so he'd lose on tiebreakers. And then fucking Narita does a bull shot, gets a 3 count, and then Hinade's tournament's over, and it's like, my God, I've spent all that money and time, and for a fucking bull shot to knock out my favorite, that took me some time to recover from, actually. And Narita's a funny one, to be honest, because I followed him all since the young Lion days, and back when they used to do those Lionsgate shows at Shinjuku Face. And I thought he was one of the most talented young Lion wrestlers, and it's always hard at the beginning to know how good they're going to be. And he was apparently beasting it up over in the US, and Joel, you watched all those strong style shows, and from what I understand.
Yeah, Strong was like the Narita show. It seemed like a product specifically designed to like help polish Red Narita.
Yeah, and sometimes Gedo has this habit, which tends to be more smarter than you think, to bring people in, and I can think of 2 good examples of this. Bring them in as baby faces and then turn them heel. And the 2 that come to mind is Kenta. So Kenta came back initially with Shibata as a baby face, and everyone hated him because he was from Noah, right? And of course at G1 Final he turned on Kenta, and I'm pretty sure Gedo had sort of planned all that from the beginning, right? And that was pretty clever. The second one was Driller Maloney, and I remember you guys saying on one of your shows, like, fuck, he puts up that United Empire sign, like, just too much, right? He's just got to do a little bit less of that. But that was clearly another one where he was set up to pretend that he's a babyface, and then he turns heel because Akira is, drinking bubble tea and eating strawberries every day, and he wants to go drink beer and fuck women or whatever he wants to do. So that seemed like that sort of babyface to heel switch. But Narita feels different, right? So he came back to that weird strong style group of him, Suzuki, and Disby, which just seemed to be like very talented individuals, but a very random group to be in. And I thought, and I've heard rumors that maybe Narita's passion is a bit less for whatever reason than before. He actually lives in this prefecture I'm sitting in right now, in Niigata. So he doesn't live in Tokyo. But, he got put in the House of Torture. And I wonder if that was just them acknowledging that maybe what they were hoping for him as a babyface didn't really pan out. So give him some time in House of Torture to try and figure out some of his character work, and, later on and get a push, whether that be on the baby or the heel side. But I would agree with you. I'd put him quite low down in the overall thing, and that's what pissed me probably even more about that Hinata result was Narita being up on 10 points. He's joint leading with Cobb and Finley, right? And it's like, why the fuck would you do that? So I certainly hope he doesn't make the Bebop quarters. He doesn't do much for me at the moment.
Do you think the gimmick is a net positive for him, or do you think it's something that bogs him down?
Well, if I compare him to say Evil, right, as part of the same faction, Evil's got a lot of charisma and he's pretty funny, so that works in his favor. Whereas Narita just comes out, he's got his fucking dollar shop fucking cape that he wears and stuff, and he's got his push-up thing. And he is a genuinely talented wrestler, right? Like, some of those bridging suplexes are beautiful that he does, but I don't know. I just figure out that I just figured he got put in House of Torture because he's struggling as a baby. But I don't even really think within House of Torture he's found really the right character. I think some of his facial expressions are pretty good, but just the overall package doesn't really do much for me, to be honest.
Move on to talking about Jeff Cobb, who is on 10 points. He beat Oleg Boltin, lost to Finlay, and faces Tsuji on the final night. I think he's had a good tournament. He slowed down a bit towards the end, and I think has been built as a suitable final hurdle for Tsuji, a match that Tsuji won when they faced in the New Japan Cup, and that's making me question the outcome here. I think Tsuji should win again, but I won't be putting my foot through my TV if Jeff Cobb does win.
Yeah, Cobb. My thought, and I don't normally do pick'ems or anything like that, but I normally try and guess just at the beginning, just with myself, like, who are the three that would go through on this block? The three that I thought would go through, and they may well do. Who knows? But I thought it would be Finlay, Takeshita, and Tsuji. Those were the three that I thought. I knew Cobb would get a lot of points because he's a fantastic wrestler, right? Like, he's incredibly strong, and you can see him sort of manhandle really, really big guys. And, in this block, he had guys like Hinata, for example, who's normally kicking the shit out of everybody, and he's just tossing him around. And even Oleg. And that was quite a cool match to watch. Like, just two completely beefy boys smashing the fuck out of each other. But my suspicion is Cobb will miss out on going ahead. But I could be wrong there. Like easily could be wrong there. And I think style-wise, he's a nice change to the palette when you're watching, 5 matches every night, singles matches that is, to see somebody who's just got such an amazing strength. And he really impresses the Japanese crowd. He's pretty over, and just purely just his strength that gets him there. But I think Tsuji being, if you talk about musketeers, and there were 3 of them, right, supposedly, and sadly we'll talk about the fourth non-musketeer in a minute, but if you say Shota was one of them and he got knocked out before his time, Narita was another one and his character's not really working. Tsuji would probably be the one out of the 3 that's most likely holding course, maybe not setting the world on fire. So I would expect him maybe to go through at the expense of Cobb, but let's see.
I don't know how Jeff Cobb doesn't have a contract with a major promotion, right? Like, I don't know if do you know if he has a 2-year deal with New Japan right now? I don't know if he does.
What I would say, without I'm mindful of sharing stuff that's sort of more personal information, but from what I understand, he's sort of shacked up with Japanese lady. So that may well be the reason that he's staying in New Japan, not taking the big AEW bucks. Then that's not to say he won't go, but that's maybe part of the reason, I would say.
Might play a factor, sure. I just find that amazing that a guy that talented hasn't been snatched up by someone.
Yeah.
Like, to me, he's really got it all. He could play the monster heel. He could play the monster babyface. Super talented, and you're right, just strength coming out of his fucking ears. Like to me, he's one of those guys that has it all that I'm left scratching my head. Like, okay, so how is this guy not a major player.
He was very outspoken around Forbidden Door time, wasn't he, about the state of things in AEW? So it just could be that, he doesn't really fancy either of the two major options in the States.
Sure. I mean, definitely. A lot of times it's in their court of, I'm sure they've been wooed to sign on the dotted line. So yes, absolutely, that's on the table. But like I said, over the years, it's kind of like one of those guys that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb of, why is this guy not around? So again, I don't know if that's him. I don't know if it's his decision. I don't know if it's a combination of wrong time, right place, wrong time, whatever. But yeah, I think like if we look at the history of modern pro wrestling, like Jeff Cobb is one of those guys that I think will go down as what if.
Yeah, I just say two quick things in finishing on him. One of the unfortunate things was he probably got his biggest push right in the middle of that sort of dead period in COVID, right? He had one of those G1 where I think he lost only like one group round match. So that was a bit unfortunate. And secondly, when it comes to AEW, like, let's be blunt, and I don't want to be polarizing fans of that product, but, money is the key driver there. And again, rumor has it, whatever is his personal situation, it may well be that the lady he's met comes from quite a wealthy family. So the need for AEW cash might be a bit lower than it might be for some of the others.
Oh my God, that guy's living the life. Living the life. Whew. All right.
Let's move on to Yuya Uemura, who has 8 points. He lost to Ren, beat Tsuji, and unfortunately got injured. Dislocated elbow, I heard. So he gets a forfeit loss to Oleg for the final night. And it's a real shame he got injured because we can only speculate how far he might have gone. I suspect his tournament being front-loaded with statement wins suggests he might have fallen short at the end. But for a silver lining, I think having that bittersweet moment in front of the fans after beating Tsuji, but I think like kind of knowing that his tournament was done and he's kind of holding back the tears, that's something that long-term could work in Yuya's favour and provide him with that all-important emotional buy-in with the fans and also like a nice body part for opponents to work over. So in spite of the injury, I think Yuya is a massive stock up for me this tournament. His rise is one of the biggest reasons I think why Shota smells fraudulent right now. Because if we're asking, who's the successor to Tanahashi, I think Yuya's eating Shota's lunch here.
Yeah, one of the things I felt was kind of weird about that whole Three Musketeers thing was, and obviously he came back a little bit later than the other three, but why he was never included in that. And I think the popular opinion amongst most fans was that, Yuya was one of the best of that bunch, right? Maybe even the best. But then he came back, and to be honest, I don't know, like if I was a wrestler, just 5 guys, I wouldn't be in a hurry to join that faction, to be honest. I think it's, even the name, right? It sucks. Like, just 5 guys. And he came back with what I thought was quite a vanilla packaging, like Heat Storm. What does that mean? And I thought it's kind of Sonata light a little bit, right? Like, no real...
All right, Kevin Kelly. God.
But I watched this match against Tsuji at Wrestle Kingdom, right? And didn't really do anything for me. I thought, oh, fuck, maybe this is a case of I thought he was a man as a young lion. Turns out he's not as good. And I tell you what, like, I don't know if we'll have time for best matches of the tournament or anything so far, but I did write a short list of 3 or 5 of standout matches. And no doubt, Takamatsu Night 4 against Takeshita when he went over, that was fucking incredible. And that's when fans kind of realize things, especially Japanese fans, right? They love foreign wrestlers for sure, but they love nothing more than a new star Japanese guy coming. And that's really what they need to get the promotion running. And I think you can do that. And so the night he got injured, I think it was in Sendai. So again, this was in the middle of my dark period of all these Shinkansen problems. And I was sitting in the front row, fortunately for that one, and I saw that happen. So that was a frog splash, which is a pretty safe move, right? Like, normally nothing goes wrong, and he was the one giving it, not taking it. Makes it even more surprising that something happened. And I don't know if you guys, I haven't rewatched it on World, but it was really weird. And obviously, I kind of respect what the WWE and others do in those situations where they just stop the match, right? But Japan being Japan, and still carry on. But Red Shoes did a really weird count of the first pin that Yuya tried to do on Tsuji. And he could have fucking counted to about 4 or 5, let alone 3, but somehow raised up his arm at 2, and I was like, oh, something's fucking really off here. And then he pinned him, and then I took a photo of him, and maybe I'll plug my Twitter at the end of this. But I got a photo of him, and this was in between after he'd won, before he cut the sort of, the main event promo. And he was in tears, and I knew, like, I couldn't tell clearly what was wrong with him. I'm not a doctor, but I knew something bad had happened, and I knew that I had this feeling that his tournament was over. And that's pretty heartbreaking, right? Because that happened match out of match 9, and going back all the way to the beginning of this podcast, nobody knows who's going to win this race. So who the fuck's to say you didn't have a chance of going all the way, or at least deep? And now that's being cruelly taken away from him. And I thought what was quite impressive for such a young guy is he held his shit together. He got the microphone, knowing he was cooked and knowing his tournament was over, and gave a very impassioned speech. And I kind of agree with you, Joel. It might be that kind of unfortunate incident that pays you back down the track. But yeah, that was an incredible shame. And I think he's really...
Maybe it's this Kikuchi moment. It was scripted by the big man.
By Kikuchi or Tsuji, did you say? Sorry.
By Kikuchi.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is all part of Kikuchi's plan.
Kikuchi said you need to do a frog splash, you need to fuck up your elbow so you're out of the tournament, and then come back 6 months later and everyone's going to love you, right? So he's just merely following orders of the chef. But no, I mean, it is a huge shame. And for me, I thought there was a real risk that he was just going to go down the Sonata path, which I thought would be most unfortunate. But he's got a pretty simple moveset, but, he's willing to go strong style and stuff. And that match against Takeshita, that was fucking amazing. So, yeah, he definitely stocks up. And like you say, this whole injury may work in his favor long term.
This time next year, are we talking about him headlining a dome?
I don't see why not, right? Like again, you go back to that whole Three Musketeers thing, right? Well, where the fuck is Shota? Where is Narita? And Tsuji, okay, maybe. And for whatever reason, Yuya wasn't put in that bunch, but he should have been. And I think he'd be neck and neck with Tsuji and Gabe Kidd, to be honest, who's not really talked about in no spirit. But I think you mentioned before, Joel, that Manabu, your friend, had sort of said the real Three Musketeers of New Japan, Tsuji, Yuya, and Gabe, and I would fully agree with that.
Correct, yeah. Okay, let's move on to Hiroki Goto, who has 8 points, beat David Finlay, and then lost to ELP. He faces Henare on the last night. I'm still all in on the Goto underdog victory story. From the moment he brought his kids out at Korakuen, that big dad energy goes hard. It won me over. And I genuinely think there's great value in going with Goto as the last bastion of chaos, the old guards, seeing his buddies Okada and Ishii and Yoshihashi and Yano all out of this year's tournament. So he's the last man standing, flying the flag for that generation, as well as chasing his own moment of glory that's eluded him so far in his career. And up to this point, I would have strongly argued against giving Goto a world title reign, and that guys like Goto not winning the world title helps to elevate it by way of exclusivity. But now, the events of the last 12 months and Goto's excellent performances, both in the tag division and in this tournament, as well as the groundswell of fan support, has convinced me that he should be the man not only to win the G1, but win the title at Wrestle Kingdom. What a story that would be. And not a forced one, not a manufactured one. It would feel organic. It would feel earned. And what an incredible moment that would be. You could just imagine it, him in the Tokyo Dome. He finally lifts that IWGP belt. He's got his family with him there. And I really think it's genius to have him put together those two unlikely wins against Takeshita and Finlay, only to then lose to ELP, and his disbelief at getting caught out as he tried to pin ELP and the match is finished and the ref saying, no, it's over. That was just heartbreaking to just snatch it away, just to make you doubt, only to have him get an unlikely win against Henare, sneak through the blocks, get him in third place, make it to the final. That would be the most memorable G1 story for years. None of it's going to happen, of course, but I believe that it should. So Violent Skipping says, with his performance and reactions during the G1 and possibly the leadership void in chaos, has Goto been rehabbed to a legit upper mid-carder / Dontaku size show title challenger?
Simple to answer to that question is a definite yes. So I think he was, we talk about the youth movement and everything, and I think a few eyebrows were raised when the first 18 came out and Goto was in that 18. And some people said, Finlay had to pull out a New Japan Cup. He only made the final because of that, and then he has one good match against Suji, and that got him in. And I must admit, probably I was part of that thinking. And I think bring out the kids was one thing, but I think, again, getting back to best matches of the tournament, he had an absolute banger with Takeshita, again, that name, in Nagoya, night 10. And that was really an immense performance. And I thought that one, then backed up by his Korakuen match. And you know what? Like, just going back to this mysterious Kikuchi individual, out of all the people that I'd like a photo with, and it would be almost impossible to do, would be with Kikuchi, because he never comes out to the hallways or anything like that. He really plays that sort of young boy style role where he's taking stuff out from the ring after wrestlers take their clothes off and start the match. And I saw him at Korakuen, and he was leading 2 young children. And I didn't know they were Goto's kids. I had no idea who they were, but I knew they must be important. And he was surprisingly out, and I was thinking, oh, this might be a photo chance. But he's with 2 kids. I thought, no, I'm definitely going to leave him alone. It would be rude to interrupt that. And, that was a really heartwarming moment, because it's incredibly rare to see, like I think I mentioned before, public acknowledgement of family. And I think it's fair to say, and as far as I know, it's truth, that Goto's probably the ultimate family man in the company. So that was really cool. And like I said, that was the most popular photo that I took. My gut feel is, though, as much as you sort of were working yourself up there, Joel, and I'm not quite sure what was happening off screen when you did that impassioned speech.
I was lovingly staring at the faces of my beautiful sleeping children,
God.
thinking about what a privilege it is to be a father.
Yeah.
And look, I know Henare is going to win and even up the points, as they always do,
that's what I feel will happen. But I kind of agree with you. Like, that would be an interesting path to take, because if time permits, we should probably talk about who's going to win and maybe what Dome might look like. But I must admit, sort of before this tournament started, I got down for like 4 points or something, right? He'll give solid matches, but his role is to put over the younger guys. But there's been a real organic movement in the fan base behind Goto. He's always been supported, particularly by older Japanese fans. I think pretty much everyone has loved him on these shows. And I know a good friend of the show, Chris Charlton, Joel, I saw him on the way back from one of the shows, and he was talking about that after the Korakuen show. And it's been quite a heartwarming thing. And to be fair to him, it's not just that, he's a good guy and he's got kids in there. He's legitimately produced some real banger matches as well, and shows that, no question, he deserved his spot in the automatic 18.
Yeah, and I'll be quick, Joel. Trust me. August 12th, 2024, we're talking about Hiroki Goto, and we're talking about like MVP type language, and 2 matches that everyone is saying go out of your way to watch, and I would echo that. Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it? And I think it was Chris Samsa last week. By the way, are we on a fucking roll with shows? Jesus Christ, how great is it to be a fan of this fucking show? He mentioned, in any other time, Hiroki Goto would be a massive star in the promotion, and he is a star. But to be on the same roster as Okada, Tanahashi, Omega, Jay, the list goes on. Naito, Ibushi. I mean, just a roster. How do you get through that and make a name for yourself? So I'm glad that people are hyped for him. I'm glad that people are excited. I'm excited for him. Yeah, it'd be a great story. Do I think it's going to happen? No. But he has been absolutely a highlight, not only in G1, but this year. And let's be very clear, maybe in the past 2 years, maybe even more, like he's been a stud. And he deserves all the fucking flowers. Absolutely.
Yota Tsuji, 8 points. He beat Hanare, lost to Yuya, and faces Jeff Cobb in his final match. Hanare match was good. I really liked a bit at the end where he did that sick dive to avoid the PK and rebounded with the Gene Blast. Yuya match was just getting to that next gear before the injury ruined it. So I think Tsuji's had a good tournament, but the improvements of others like Gabe and Okan and Goto, to name a few, have stolen some of his buzz. Now, that said, I feel that he has more high-profile matches to come in this tournament. So I'm not going to draw any conclusions yet. I think he should beat Jeff Cobb again to advance. And yeah, I'll maybe judge him when his tournament is done and dusted.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add on Tsuji, to be honest. If I be objective, maybe I'd say slightly underwhelming. Might have thought that it would have seen a little bit more from him. I tend to find he relies too much on the same kind of stuff. The big grin as he comes out to the ring and all that. And there's no doubt that he's got charisma and aura and all that kind of stuff. But in ring, I think his cardio probably needs to be a little bit better. We talked about someone like Takagi, who's much older than Tsuji. Tsuji tends to wrestle sort of typically shorter matches. And I just feel like he tends to wrestle quite similar each time. And I think he will be a star, and I agree with you. He'll go further in this tournament, but hasn't been super exciting for me watching him.
Yeah, I would agree. There's not a lot that you're going back to watch or you're putting down in your notebook for end of the year or anything like that. And yes, there are a couple matches to go here, so maybe he has something up his sleeve. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's sitting here and like we're talking more of what if, what could be, what possibly is in the future, as opposed to the here and now, where I don't know. I think a lot of people were like, "Okay, buddy, put it together and give us what you got." And I don't think anybody's giving it the thumbs down, but I don't know. Maybe there's more in the tank, but right, there's nothing to.
Well, one last thing I'd say about Tsuji. I mentioned before about photos that I take and sort of, which wrestlers in it, who gets most likes, ELP, Gabe, these kind of guys. Tsuji's another one. Doesn't really get that much focus. So if I take a nice photo of him, fans are a bit lukewarm on him. So I think he started with a bang, but I think maybe he's suffering a little bit sort of second year syndrome, just a bit. There's not.
What do you think needs? What do you think he needs?
More variety in his matches, I think. That's what I think he needs. And one of the questions from a factional perspective, again, I mentioned this point before, I think it's problematic for New Japan. You got 4 of your supposed biggest stars all in one mega cool faction. Is that really the best way to do things? And who knows, maybe by the end of this tournament, if it's Takagi, for example, that ends up facing off against Naito, maybe they're going to split. And I could easily see another universe where Naito keeps LIJ, Tsuji does his own thing with a whole bunch of Mexican buddies and stuff, and Takagi goes with all the Japanese hardcore and people like Hinade, strong style guys and stuff. But at the moment, I think he just kind of gets lost in the mix in the factional sense, and then I think he wrestles too similarly in each of his matches.
Konosuke Takeshita, he's got 8 points. He beat El Phantasmo, lost to Oleg Boltin, and faces Ren in his last match. I was worried prior to the tournament that I'd overhyped Takeshita, but if anything, he's exceeded that extremely high bar that we set for him. Make no mistake, this is one of the best professional wrestlers on the planet, and he's raised the bar, and others are busting their asses just trying to keep up with him, which is brilliant. It's a kick up the arse that a lot of these guys needed, the company needed as a whole. And he's given so many of these guys their best match in the tournament. Looking at Tsuji and Yuya and Goto and ELP and Oleg, I think it would be criminal for Ren Narita to eliminate this guy when we could squeeze 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 more matches out of this guy. And he, to me, has got the vibes of prime Kazuchika Okada, which I really felt during that amazing ELP match. And who knows what Takeshita's future holds. But by all accounts, you can see he's loving being in this tournament and proving why he's one of the best. And that's the beauty of the Grade 1 Climax, isn't it? To provide that platform, especially for guys like this who perhaps are feeling creatively unfulfilled in their home promotions.
Yeah, he's a guy I'd try and keep it quick, but probably I'd have the most to say about. So I think everything about him is fascinating. And I'd start with probably a comment I heard from 2 different wrestlers after their singles matches with Takeshita, where they said he's at Osprey Okada level. Like, guys are walking into their singles matches with him, stressing out about not being able to keep up with him because he's so good. And he's got a very unique build for a Japanese, right? Like, he's super, super tall, and he's really, really beefy. He's almost like an Okada version 2.0 kind of thing. And his athleticism is off the charts. And like I told you, I didn't typically watch other Japanese promotions in the past, but I did watch DDT once 5 years ago or something, and I noticed then, I thought, fuck, he's quite good, and it'd be good to get him in. And this might be a rare example where the link to AEW actually works in New Japan's favor for once, instead of screwing us over like normal. Because I think if it was more of a DDT to New Japan thing, it would be more difficult to get him more involved. But I get the sense that there's more involvement there, and I don't think that his link up with United Empire was just by default. I think there's some meaning there. And I'm also fascinated, and I really don't know what's going on there with this whole Shinsuke Nakamura thing that he keeps referencing, which I find quite fascinating. That he's talking about, having a WWE mentor. So who knows where that will go. I think, and Goto made reference in a promo that, we'll see more of him in New Japan. 100%, maybe not. But something higher. I don't think it'll be G1 and done. And I totally agree. I mean, Narita should already be in jail for knocking out Hinade via a bull shot. But his sentence would be lengthened by a further 20 years if he takes Takeshita out of it. Because I told my girlfriend who's coming to the quarterfinals, I said, because she thought Ospreay and Okada were amazing. I said, oh, don't worry, there's another guy that's going to come along who you're going to see, and he's guaranteed to make the quarters. And obviously after he lost to Bolton, there's a bit more jeopardy there now. But I'd be amazed if he doesn't make it through. And, in a perfect world, he gets signed full-time, and, I'm in dream world here. I don't think this will happen. Becomes United Empire leader. Sorry, TJP, but maybe it's not you. And New Japan, in my view, would have a true young Japanese ace. And backstage, all the reports are, and just like you said, Joel, he's absolutely loving the tour, feeling creatively fulfilled, and he sounds like a bit more of a serious individual compared to some of the other guys. And the other interesting sort of fact, and I don't know that much about it, but apparently his family's quite wealthy. So again, whether the allure of AEW cash is as strong for him as others, remains to be seen.
Isn't it weird how that is, in the sense of there are a lot of pro wrestlers who come from very well-to-do backgrounds, and it's weird that they're given that creative freedom to say, okay, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. And I'm sure there's many conversations at the dinner table like, you're going to do what now? Right? So, yeah, I mean, look, I think this company would be just like, they have a gift right in front of them. And to not take advantage of that, I feel like would be just such a disservice to everyone. The company, the stockholders of Bushiroad, fans buying ringside tickets, fans at home watching on World, just everything. It's pre-baked. They have a future that could be unbelievable if G1 is any indicator. So, as I said before, if whatever needs to be done, line up get the blank check, line it up, get them to sign, and let's lock it down, because your future is right in front of you, right in the ring. And I think everyone is in agreement that this would be a fucking great future, and people can get excited for, and people can hitch their wagon to and say, okay, this is our guy for the next 3, 4, 5, 7 years. And like the thing about it is that he's only going to get better. Like that's the amazing part to me. He's already great, and he's only going to get better. So hopefully they can work it out. I would be thrilled, and I think everybody would be too.
Yeah, and just sorry, I'm conscious of the time, but a couple of last things I'd say. All the Japanese fans that I speak to after shows are all singing his praises, right? They all want him to come. And it kind of reminds me of that Jake Lee comment before, right? New Japan don't have a lot of cash to throw around. So is it really that wise to blow some of your wad on a guy who's okay? Like, I'm not bagging Jake. I think he's all right. But would you not be better off served by saving your money for one really true big star? You know, if Naito retires next year, then I think New Japan are in a real bind. And having Takeshita around would make a big difference. And on my list, and I don't know if we'll have time for it or not, but I wrote down 5 or 6 best matches of the tournament. Takeshita's in 3 of those 6.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing what he's been able to do. I wanted to ask you this before we moved any further, though. Being that we're kind of talking a little bit AEW, what's the general sense of that promotion in Japan and the fans that you talk to and the friends that you communicate with? Like, what's the vibe of AEW, and what's the vibe of Tony Khan and the Brinks truck, if you will, being backed up and bags of money being thrown at wrestlers?
Yeah, the thing is, I find that in general, Japanese fans' knowledge of AEW and of its existence is actually quite low. So to be honest, I'm trying to remember if I even myself know how to watch it, but they don't know a lot about it. And then you get more emotive fans, which is very rare in Japan. But there's a couple of followers that I've got who've got in their bio "fuck Tony Khan" as a as a little headline and stuff, and that's just their favorites getting lost, right? So there is some resentment there, like Okada leaving, and you guys, you broke that story as well, and that was one that shocked a lot of people. And the resentment towards AEW was stronger. I mean, let's see perhaps what happens in that January 5th show, and whether or not there's some sort of AEW payback there. But I mean, just putting a personal spin back on it again, like for me, and Joe often refers to Tony Khan's overflowing toy box. To me, it's a travesty that somebody as talented as Takeshita is getting periodically used on TV, and I won't bag other AEW wrestlers, although I'm tempted to do so, who get more TV time than he does, and then he comes out here and he fucking kills it. So I'm going to remain optimistic that one way or another, New Japan will sign him. Maybe not 100%, but I'd even take a 1/3 deal. He does DDT dates, AEW dates, and New Japan dates. That would be good enough for me. If we got him 100%, that would be perfect.
Oleg Boltin, 8 points. He lost to Cobb and beat Takeshita and gets a forfeit win over Yuya in the final match. I was very, very surprised that he beat Takeshita. And, although he may not have been initially intended to reach 8 points, that's still a hell of an achievement in a debut G1. And his performances, the manner of those signature wins, tells me that I was right to be excited about Oleg. And I like Callum. Oleg has got a lot to learn and a lot of growing to do, but I think I've seen everything that I needed to see in this G1 to assure me that Oleg Boltin is going to get there too.
Yeah, I agree, right? Like the logical comparison I think to make would be that Oleg and Callum, those were the 2 extra ones, right? And if you compare the two, then I think Oleg sort of appears to tick the box much more neatly. I think Japanese fans are really impressed by his strength, and that's very real based on his background. I think the new costume stuff really worked for him, and from what I understand, sort of that was all designed by him himself, and that's given him a really new, fresh look as well. It's interesting though. One thing I heard about him is that he came to New Japan 2 years ago, whenever it was, and he didn't know anything about pro wrestling before and never even watched a pro wrestling match and stuff. So he's really still learning his way, but he looks all right in the ring, I think, and I think he's got a lot of upside. Occasionally, I think there's no doubt the power's there. Sometimes doesn't look quite as smooth as other wrestlers, but I think they definitely made the right call in including him this year.
That is amazing.
Kind of works in his favor in a way. Like there is that sort of tangible sense of struggle and those rough edges in his matches that kind of lend it a air of authenticity rather than like super smooth reversal sequences.
Yeah. Now I might tell you guys to continue on talking while the Red Bull is taking it
Kicking in
on me.
All right, we'll make it quick. We're going to wrap up soon.
Yeah. No, I'll let you speak for the next minute or so, and I'll come back.
All right, we'll wait for the caffeine to kick in. I'm with you. I'm shocked that he had no concept of pro wrestling. Never watched the match. That's pretty amazing. He's never going to be able to get my Stan Hansen references or anything like that for the show. So it's a learning thing. Imagine that, not having any real concept of that. I mean, I know New Japan kind of leans into that. They did that in the 90s with Soviet wrestlers who were legitimate pro wrestlers, like in the amateur-y sense of, I'm going to throw you around kind of thing. They did that in the 90s, and they headlined big shows. They had a whole fucking summer, it felt like, whole year that was based around them. So they do kind of lean into that. But I'm always impressed by that. People who have no concept of what the fuck this is. And to get in at such a high level is pretty amazing. All right, Joel, why don't we just hit on a couple of wrestlers? I know we're kind of pressed for time. And we'll just give real quick thoughts.
Okay, we've got Henare, who's on 6 points, lost to Suji and Ren, faces Goto in his final match. I've got to say, first of all, that I thought Henare was brilliant on colour commentary with Walker today. He's by far and away the best guest. So if the wrestling doesn't work out, they should give him that gig for sure. He was just giving wonderfully in-depth analysis of the different strategies of each wrestler, why they might be choosing a particular move and what effect that move would have on their opponent. Just doing exactly what you want from a wrestler providing colour commentary. And in ring, I think he's had a good tournament. He's slowed down a touch. I mean, obviously, it's not possible to deliver 9 matches of the energy and intensity of that Gabe match you mentioned before, Fraser. And, were it against anyone else, I'd say that he should win his next match and that the Never champion should probably be getting 10 points, let alone 8. But unfortunately, it's against top dad Goto, so he has to lose. Sorry, I don't make the rules.
He's been great, hasn't he? It's been real refreshing. I know he's been really hyped for this fucking tournament. It's amazing how a guy how long it takes for things to not only click with them but click with the promotion in how can we use him and how can we put him in a role and can we put him in a spot to deliver. He's delivered. Again, I've said it many times, but don't be surprised at the end of the year when we start seeing ballots and his name is on that wrestler of the year. He might not win. He might not get second place, but I think there's going to be plenty of votes for him, and well-deserved. I think he's had a really good, solid tournament. Better than solid. How about that? Really very, very good tournament. And I would put him in probably if I had to give a top 5, I would put him in a top 5 easily. And the best part about it is that it feels like he's putting it all together. So not only is the synergy there with the company, it's there with him too. So, he's done great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, right? He's a Kiwi, I'm a Kiwi, so I'd probably be more likely to give him praise. But personally, sort of broader than just the G1, I mean, our stories a little bit in parallel. We came to Japan around about the same time, and obviously he had a very long struggle in the company, and credit to him, he sort of ground that out, right? And, I think there's probably some truth to the rumors that WWE came along with a lot more money. And if a guy like Tangaloa can stand around earning $350K a week or something like that for being Polynesian, then probably Inari could have potentially benefited from that as well. And the vibe I get is he's not going to go down that path, and that passion for that New Japan part holds true. And I think it's taken him time, and I think Ospreay did him a big favor getting him into United Empire. That helped him, step one. But then when he got the facial tattoo, which he didn't just do for wrestling, that has a lot more cultural meaning for him, and he's got more tattoos to come, not on his face, but in other parts of the body, probably in the next year or so. So you have an even more different look going forward. I think he's now really found, and in a way, a little bit. Joe, you said before, like you're breaking his arm, kind of long term might help him. I think sort of getting your skull cracked open by a gay kid table, it's kind of worked for Hanare a little bit as well. And he's definitely respected a lot more backstage, I think, than before. He probably didn't have the wisest choice around some of his social media usage and stuff like that. But I think he's put it all together now. I think he's had a good, solid tournament, and a lot of people sort of compared him to Ishii, and I think something like that is probably fair. I think he had a very good match with Yuya. Again, I'm still slightly disappointed Narita knocked him out, but it is what it is. I think he'll go over Goto, and that's what I'd have to say to him.
Right, the last guy to talk about is El Phantasmo, who's on 6 points. Lost to Takeshita and beat Goto and faces Finlay on the final night. That Takeshita match, that's everything I love about El Phantasmo. Like, he knew it was do or die, and he had to win. So he emptied the tank against Takeshita with the support of his most loyal Korakuen fans behind him. And that seems to be the match that has won over the casual fans. Like, Big Dave has given it 5 stars for whatever that's worth to you. And for me, it had the vibes of Okada versus Omega matches with that escalating sense of danger, the crazy table spot where he got his back slashed open, just the insane pace and athleticism. And maybe that is ELP's ceiling, to deliver the goods in tournament matches where he throws everything he has but ultimately loses, like he did against Takeshita, Robbie Eagles in Best of Super Juniors 2022, Rocky Romero in Best of Super Juniors 2019, Will Ospreay in last year's G1. Like, those are all his top-rated matches, and those are all tournament matches where he's lost. So maybe he's just like the white Honma, the lovable loser. And look, I'm not saying that he should get the Kenny Omega booking and be world champion or anything, but I just can't help but feel, watching matches like the Takeshita one, that we could be doing so much more with him when he can perform at this elite level, when he's got the right opponents in the right spot.
Yeah, I'd have a couple of quick comments on ELP. One of the most common questions I ask Japanese fans when I see them at the venue is, what do you think is the best match of the tournament? Popular opinion holds now that ELP and Takeshita holds the number one spot, which is the first one to say. The other thing I find interesting is more on the character side is, where is he going to go, right? Like, all the Tone guys fucked off to WWE, and now he's got Jado, which I think, to be honest, makes his G1 schedule so much harder, right? Because you go, one night you wrestle singles, and the next night you wrestle a tag. And almost always, Jado, sort of chairs the LP in, so basically LP does another singles match while Jado does nothing. So I reckon, I would speculate that maybe something character-wise happens with him at the end of the G1 or afterwards. I can't see him just staying with Jado forever. So I feel like there's something coming there.
Yeah, I would hope. I mean, look, let's put it this way. Fraud Watch, he's officially off. People who want to stick to that can get right up the street, because this is what we were talking about. This is exactly it. Now, if you want to make the argument of consistency or where was this, wherever, okay, great. Maybe he wasn't put in that position to do so. But I think anybody who has doubts or fears or questions this man's ability, just do me a favor, go back a couple nights, watch that match. Like, seriously, that match was fucking awesome. And it was a two-way. It was both dance partners equal time. So, yep, he is officially off my Fraud Watch, and he should be off of yours. And I'm looking at you, Discord.
Right, quick thoughts at the end then. Fraser, can you please just map out for us how you think the rest of the tournament's going to play out and your Wrestle Kingdom predictions?
Yeah, so this is a popular talking point amongst fans, right? So A block's obviously sorted out, so we know what's happening there. And then B block, I sort of said from the start, and I'll stick with this for now, it's Finley, Tsuji, and Takeshita going through. Then you sort of work backwards and sort of say, what do you want your Dome main event to be? And popular opinion from all the Japanese I speak to is that Naito, irrespective of his health and condition and stuff, needs to be on one side of that. So the question is, who's the other dance partner? I reckon there's 4 possible opportunities, and I don't want to get more narrow than that because I really don't know myself. One could be Zack, and although the vibes I get, the way Zack sort of ran off with the belt sort of after he beat him in, I think it was Osaka or something like that. Maybe I'm reading too much into these things, but that feels more like the sort of the October style defense rather than the Wrestle Kingdom one, but I could be wrong. But Zack's one of the 4 possibilities. Then the other 3 for me are more interesting. The next one is Takagi, and I think Takagi would be a fascinating one because they're obviously part of the same faction. There's no doubt for me, alongside Takeshita, Takagi, well, if we treat Takeshita as an outsider for now, Takagi for me is the best sort of overall in-ring worker. He can work a crowd brilliantly. He seems to never get tired. So I would be quite fascinated by a Naito Takagi main event at the Dome, and again, sort of work backwards and assume the G1 winner follows suit. Another option, although I'm sort of less hot on this now after seeing what I've seen, but again, there's still more matches to come, would be Tsuji. But they've kind of already done Naito Tsuji once this year, so the chance of that happening I don't think is super high. And then the last one, which is a bit more out there, and maybe it's my personal bias that I put it on the list, but I would love a Naito Takeshita main for January 4, but perhaps given he's an AEW guy for now, at least, that's maybe more something that might happen, not necessarily against Naito, but against somebody at January 5. But I can't help but feel that there's something in that United Empire thing, right? Because one thing, I'm sure you noticed it on TV, the UE guys often go up to Takeshita to do that kind of crowns up symbol to him, and he's never acknowledged it yet. But I'm waiting for the moment that he does that, which I'm thinking is going to come. And that, I think, would be something quite exciting. So popular opinion in summary over here is Naito will be in the Dome main event. Now he gets a chance to rest, which is good. And now it's just a question of which of those 4, and of course it could be somebody else, who knows, will be the dance partner on the other side.
Right, is there anything else you would like to discuss with regards to the Grade 1 Climax? Anything you want to plug before we wrap this up?
We've pretty much hit 3 hours, right? So I think I'll stop there. I'll just quickly plug my Twitter account. So for anyone who finds this remotely interesting, at Fraserjapan is the handle. So yeah, most of it's more like taking photos. I take photos not only just of the shows, but of the different places that I visit and stuff. So people who are less familiar with Japan get a better sense of what's out there. So if you can follow along on the fun, that's much appreciated. And I'd also encourage if anybody who's planning to come out, and I'm sure there'll be more foreign fans at Ryogoku, if you've got any questions about the practicalities of Japan, more than happy to help people understand sort of, what to do, where to go, any ideas, that's fine. The second one I feel quite important about and want to take the chance to plug, Joel, is I mentioned before I stopped working sort of a year or 2 back and started my own company, been doing a bit of language school stuff, been doing a bit of charity work as well. Spent quite a lot of time in Turkey sort of trying to help some homeless cats over there. So Cats Anonymous is the charity of choice. So I would really encourage people, if you can include the web link in the show description, that would mean a lot to me. And I'll pretty much leave it at that.
I love how he leans into the fucking bit. He's the best. I love you, dude. You are the greatest. We appreciate everything that you do, not only for our show, but just being that voice of reason over there with boots on the ground. So again, we appreciate you waking up at 5 o'clock in the fucking morning to do this nonsense.
You motherfuckers.
We certainly are. All right, Joel, wrap it up. I'm done kissing this guy's ass.
Wait. Well, one thing, if I can say back the other way. Sorry, if I can. Not to get too mutual backslapping or anything, but I think it's awesome that you guys have been doing this for so long. Every single week, right through the COVID period, when there was every reasonable excuse not to have to watch New Japan at all. So I'm more than happy to make the occasional appearance to express some form of gratitude. So I really enjoy the show. And there was one other thing I did want to say, and I hope I don't forget what it was. This again shows that I'm tired. No, Joel, you do your bit, and then maybe there was something else that I was... No. This is what it is. Like I can share a lot of insight, right, about being here in Japan. But one thing I don't take for granted, because who knows what will happen, is I'm in a unique situation where I had a company that was supportive of me in the past to go and watch all this shit. I've got a great girlfriend who lets me do the same thing now, and hopefully I run my own business and that'll work out and I can keep doing that. So I feel really grateful to be able to do that. And Japanese fans are the best, seriously. Like, they really care about each other. So I'm sure if I relocated to States or UK or whatever, where, fan behavior is a bit more wild, I'm not saying it's good or bad or whatever, but, I just feel really grateful for that. So more than happy to share some of what I do or don't know with you guys.
And you've got a YouTube interview coming up?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that, actually. So I don't know how this is going to go, and allow me 1 second to pull up the DM. So out of the blue, I got a message from some random dude who followed up yesterday, actually. And basically, he goes by the name on Twitter. It's a katakana, Pusuto. So it's not his real name. And he says... I'll read it to you. It's quite brief. He says, "Hello, I'm a Japanese YouTuber. I often see you in documentaries about Shin Nihon, and I've been really curious about you. I'd really like to make a video interview about you, such as what job, blah, 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 blah. I'd like to interview you somewhere during the Makahari." So this is the Chiba one, coming the quarterfinal in Thursday, I think it is. And he finishes off by saying, "I'm a student, so I won't receive any money compensation." I mean, guys, we obviously haven't talked cash, but I'm expecting a huge payment for this appearance.
No problem.
And he said, "But would you please be willing to appear in my video? Thank you." And I could tell he'd use Google Translate for this, right? So I've kind of set myself a challenge. Like, he's a student, and I don't know, I'm into random shit. I've got no idea who this guy is. And I checked out his YouTube link. He's got 1,000 followers, but what he does is he does reviews of shows, and he cuts off his head, so you just kind of see him talking, but you can't see his face or anything. So it's a bit of a mystery. And I asked him, can you speak English? How are we going to do this interview? And he said, "No, I can't. I was going to use a translation apply." And my confidence for speaking Japanese has definitely improved on this G1 tour. So I told him, why don't we try and do it in Japanese?
Nice.
So that's going to happen on Thursday. So if it's of any merit, I'll send you guys a link, and you can decide whether or not you want to share it or not.
We'll share it. We'll definitely share it. All right, 3-hour shows back to back, Joel. We fucking. I mean, what for free? All that great juicy information. God, we're great. God, we are great. All right, Joel, wrap it up.
Yeah, if you've been enjoying this stuff, redcircle.com/shows/super-j-cast. Send us some money. If you throw us a recurring monthly donation, then I may even grant you access to the illustrious Deli on the Discord. So enjoy, and we'll see you all next week.
Hey now, it's Mike Gilbert, host of the Mike and JD Show, right here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Join JD by God Oliva and myself every Thursday night live on the Voices of Wrestling YouTube channel at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. as we stay up all night discussing all the hottest stories in professional wrestling. You can also check us out right here on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting feed, or you can subscribe to the Mike and JD Show feed. Now, enjoy the show.